And I'm at the hour. So, hello everyone. Welcome in, welcome in. Hope you're all doing very well today. What you got? I know that most people will probably go off and look after a little while, because that's the sort of stream I have. But for today I do ask you to stick around for just a couple minutes, because I do have something to address that will require some showing stuff off on screen. Just something that people have talked about, so I want to get ahead of it. But first things first, before we do any of that, we do, as always, have to thank our community, and to that end, thank you Wild today for gaining first. Brings you up to your 8th, which is a significant number, I'm sure. And doesn't look like we're going into the VOD today as well, so that's good. Yeah, run through the other chat list. No thanks to give today for new followers, no new books, and no badges for the day. So yeah, but if I could have your attention for a little bit of something a bit odd. A few of you have sort of messaged me in private, spoken to me, DMs, that sort of thing, that you're concerned about the bad book. The sort of guy who's, he occasionally possesses me, And you tell me, it's not normal to be possessed as regularly as I'm being possessed. That you're worried that the other chains are going to break. You've had some sort of prophetic dream, and I hear you as as a community. I hear your worries and your concerns. I do understand. When they first arrived here, the bad book was worrying me too. But when you live in a sort of cursed underground library or archive or whatever it is, you do have to get used to a couple of things. But just to assure everyone, we are going to take your visit over here, and I'm going to show you all. You can see right here, still the two chains are binding it perfectly fine and sound and intact. Right? Now I hope this allays everyone's fears. I want everyone to be sure that there's no issues, that you can see that there are still plenty of chains protecting it. There's not really in any danger of breaking out. But yeah. And if you have any thoughts, comments, questions about this, I'm happy to address them now. This is the time for, talking about it. I wanted to take some time to address it. So, if you've got any thoughts or things you'd like to talk to me about this, I am going to take a couple of minutes here before we start our normal poetry. Be like, yeah, any questions? Because I know people have had concerns. I have had messages about this, and I've talked to people. So. Yeah, well, I do understand that it's a little concerning, but you can see, there's still 3 chains binding the book, or 2 chains binding the book perfectly and safe. There's not really a risk of it getting out. Obviously there have been issues in the past, but you just got to kind of, accept that it's all fine. There's a lot of cursed objects in here. You sort of deal with them, Yeah. There also haven't been any recent flare-ups. He hasn't turned up in a while, so I'm sure it'll work out fine. So in the end, but yeah, have a little drink of water. But yeah, if that is, again, I wanted to give people a chance to ask me about it, to be like, if you had any thoughts. I mean, a few of you have mentioned, like I said, prophetic dreams or whatever, so I just wanted to, allay any suspicions, any fears. But if no one's really got any hard questions, I'll probably switch over to our normal poetry for the time being. Yeah. Sorry, something off right there. But yeah, so what were we doing? Yes. So, we're currently working our way through a book of poetry by Thomas Hardy, which I'll start here. Yeah, it's just around down there. So yeah, I will. Switch over to our normal poetry reading mic, and we'll go from there. And here we are. Now, the last poem we left off with was Your Last Drive. And continuing the collection from there, the next poem we have is The Walk. You did not walk with me of late to the hilltop, by the gated ways as in earlier days. You were weak and lame, so you never came, and I went alone, and I did not mind, not thinking of you was left behind. I walked up there today, just in the formal way, surveyed around the familiar ground by myself again. What difference then? Only that underlying sense of the look of a room on returning thence. Our next, rain on a grave. Excuse me. Just getting into the mood of it. Rain on a grave. Clouds spout upon her their waters amain, in ruthless disdain, her who but lately had shivered with pain, as at touch of dishonour, if there had lit on her so coldly, so straightly, such arrows of rain. One who to shelter her delicate head would quicken and quicken each tentative tread, if drops chanced to pelt her that summertime spills in dust-paven rills, when thunderclouds thicken and birds close their bills. Would that I lay here, and she were housed here, or better together were folded away there, exposed to one weather, we both, who would stray there, when sunny the day there, or evening was clear, at the prime of the year. Soon will be growing green blades from her mound, and daisies be showing like stars on the ground, till she forms part of them, aye, the sweet heart of them, loved beyond measure, with a child's pleasure, all her life round. The next piece we have for you, I found her out there. I found her out there, on a slope few see, that falls westwardly to the salt-edged air, where the ocean breaks on the purple strand, and the hurricane shakes the solid land. I brought her here, and have laid her to rest, in a noiseless nest, no sea beats near. She will never be stirred in her loamy cell, by the waves long heard and loved so well. So she does not sleep by those haunted heights the Atlantic smites and the blind gale sweeps, whence she often would gaze at Dungale's famed head, while the dipping blaze dyed her face fire red, and would sigh at the tale of sunk Lyonesse, as a wind-tugged tress flapped her cheek like a flail, or listen at whiles with a thought-bound brow to the murmuring miles she is far from now. Yet her shade, may be, will creep underground, till it catch the sound of that western sea, as it swells and sobs where once she domiciled, and joy in its throbs with the heart of a child. Our next poem is Without Ceremony. It was your way, my dear, to vanish without a word, when callers, friends, or kin had left you, and I listened in, to rejoin you as I inferred. And when you'd mind to career off anywhere, say to town, you were all on a sudden gone, before I had thought thereon, or noticed your trunks were down. So now that you disappear forever in that swift style, your meaning seems to me just as it used to be. Goodbye is not worthwhile. And that's the last of them we shall have tonight, for our time grows short, and the hour is near that we are meant to commence. So, does my voice sound strange to anyone else tonight? It's bothering me a little, but perhaps we return to where we should be, eh? Oh, that's a bit more like it, eh? Ooh. Got a little into it there. Ooh, sort of carried away a bit. Ooh, just a touch out of it. Sure, it's fine. Ooh. A little more evil than usual. Where? I don't think I'm evil. It's just about the book. Look, again, it's still got 2 chains on it. I'm sure there's not a problem. Look, as long as there's 2 chains holding it shut, you know, you haven't seen the other guy. I'm sure it's all fine. I do, like, again, I appreciate you being worried, but you know, it's all under control. All under control. Under control. But we, right, we got a story today, don't we? Not this one. Yeah, over here. We're carrying on with the Turn of the Screw, which once again is one of the longer ghost stories by Henry James that we got. Not exactly sure how long this is going to take us overall. We've gotten a little way into it. We didn't get super far the first time we started on it, so we'll see how we get on. Yeah, it runs in total, what, just shy of 100 pages, runs 92. At our last point we were... There we are. We were only 11 pages into it, which I think took us... Well, it took us a short hour. I don't think we got the full hour out, so... say 15 pages an hour, so... Probably we got about... Ooh. Maybe 5 hours worth of reading, actually, if we're going to get through it tonight, so... I don't know if we will. But we'll see how we get on. We can never say never, eh? But yeah. But for those of you who weren't here and aren't caught up to us, we have met a younger... Well, we first had a framing sequence where a friend of the family sort of mentions a ghost story that involves some children, and that he hints at being terrible, and as he began to tell it, we have been introduced to a young governess of no particular station, but who has been induced by a gentleman of some property and station to look after his young niece and nephew, who, being orphaned, were left in his care, and has been sent to his country estate to look after them. Whereupon he has basically said, "Don't contact me about anything. Like, you take care of it all," which is sort of the strangest thing. But the place is lovely, the little girl's lovely, and by all accounts it's been said the little boy is lovely. But in the last chapter, as we ended, she'd had a letter from his school where he was at currently, telling her that he wouldn't be welcome back in the next term, and essentially he was expelled. And that's where we left off. So, yeah. But as always, if at any point you should miss something or have any thoughts, comments, or questions, do feel free to let me know. I'm very happy to hear from anyone. And I'm happy to take a pause to cover over anything that I happen to miss. But yeah, other than that, I'll have a quick swallow of water, as my habit. And, that being the case, without any further ado, if you are sitting comfortably, I shall begin. Chapter 3. Now, thus turning her back on me were fortunately not, for my just preoccupations, a snub that could check the growth of our mutual esteem. We met, after I brought home little Miles, more intimately than ever on the ground of my stupefaction, my general emotion. So monstrous was I then, all ready to renounce that such a child had now been revealed to me should be under an interdict. I were a little late on the scene of his arrival, and I felt, as he stood wistfully looking out for me before the door of the inn at which the coach had put him down, that I had seen him on the instant, without and within, in the great glow of freshness, and the same positive fragrance of purity in which I had from the first moment seen his little sister. He were incredibly beautiful, and Mrs. Gross had put her fingers on it, everything but a sort of passionate tenderness for him that was swept away by his presence. What I then and there took him to my art for was something divine that I have never found in the same degree in any child. His indescribable little air and knowing nothing in the world but love. It would have been impossible to carry a bad name with a greater sweetness of innocence. By the time I got back to Blah with him, I remained merely bewildered, so far that is, as I were not outraged by the sense of the horrible letter locked up in one of the drawers in my room. As soon as I could compass a private word with Mrs. Gross, I declared to her that it were grotesque. She promptly understood me, You mean the cruel charge? It doesn't live an instant, my dear woman. Look at him. She smiled at my pretension and discovered his charm. I assure you, miss, I do nothing else. What will you say, then? She immediately added. In answer to the letter, I had made my mind up. Nothing at all. And to his uncle, I was incisive. Nothing at all. And to the boy himself, I was wonderful. Nothing at all. She gave her apron a great wipe to her mouth. Then I'd stand by you. We'll see it out. We'll see it out, I ardently echoed, giving her my hand to make it a vow. She held me there a moment, and whisked up her apron again with her detached hand. Would you mind, miss, if I used the freedom to kiss me? No. I took the good creature in my arms, and after we had embraced like sisters, felt still more fortified and indignant. This, at all events, were for the time, a time so full that, as I recall, the way it went reminds me of all the art I now feel used to make a little distant. Reminds me of all the art I now feel the need. Sorry, that's a bit. This, at all events, were for the time, a time so full that, as I recall the way it went, it reminds me of all the art I now need to make it a little distinct. What I looked back at with amazement in the situation, I accepted. I had undertaken, with my companion, to see it out, and I were under a charm apparently that could smooth away the extent and the far and difficult connections of such an effort. I was lifted aloft on a great wave of infatuation and pity. I found it simple, in my ignorance, my confusion, and perhaps my conceit, to assume that I could deal with a boy whose education for the world was all on the point of beginning. I am unable even to remember at that day what proposal I framed for the end of his holidays and the resumption of his studies. Lessened with me, indeed, that charming summer, we all had a theory that he were to have, but I now feel that for the weeks the lessons must have been rather my own. I learnt something, at first certainly, that had not been one of the teachings of my small smothered life. Learnt to be amused, and even amusing, not to think for the morrow. For the first time, in a manner, that I had known the space and air and freedom, all the music of summer, and all the mystery of nature. And then there were a consideration, and consideration was sweet. Oh, it were a trap, not designed, but deep, to my imagination, to my delicacy perhaps, to my vanity, to whatever in me were most excitable. The best way to picture it all is to say that I were off my guard. They gave me so little trouble. It was of a gentleness so extraordinary, I used to speculate. But even this with a dim discontentedness as to how the rough future, for all futures are rough, would handle them and might bruise them. They had the bloom of health and happiness, and yet, as if I had been in charge of a pair of little grandees, the princes of the blood, for whom everything would be right, would have to be fenced about and ordered and arranged. The only form that in my fancy the after years could take for them was that of a romantic, a really royal extension of the garden and the park. It may be, of course, above all what suddenly broke into this gives the previous time a charm of stillness, that hush in which something gathers or crouches. The change are actually like the spring of a beast. I don't remember James being this difficult. I'm sort of struggling with it a bit. In the first weeks, the days was long. They often, at their finest, gave me what I used to call my own hour. The hour when, for my pupils, tea time and bedtime having come and gone, I had before my final retirement a small interval alone. Much as I liked my companions, this hour was the thing in the day I liked most. And I liked it best of all when there's the light faded, or rather I should say, the day lingered and the last call of the last bird sounded. In a flushed sky from the old trees, I could take a turn in the grounds and enjoy, almost with a sense of propriety that amused and flattered me, the beauty and dignity of the place. It was a pleasure at these moments to feel myself tranquil and justified, doubtless perhaps also to reflect that by my discretion, my quiet good sense, and general propriety, I were given pleasure, if he ever thought of it, to the person to whose pleasure I had yielded, or to whose pressure I had yielded. What I would do him were what he had earnestly hoped and directly asked of me, and that I could, after all, do it, proved even a greater joy than I had expected. I dare say I fancied myself, in short, a remarkable young woman, and took comfort in the faith that this would more publicly appear. Well, I needed to be remarkable to offer a front to the remarkable things that presently gave their first sign. It was plump one afternoon, in the middle of my very hour. The children were tucked away, and I had come out for my stroll. One of the thoughts that, as I don't in the least shrink now from knowing, used to be with me in these wanderings, was that it would be as a charming story suddenly to meet someone. Someone would appear there at the turn of a path, and would stand before me and smile and approve. I didn't ask more than that. I only asked that he should know. And the only way to be sure he knew would be to see it, in the kind light of it, in his handsome face. This was exactly present to me, by which I mean the face was, when on the first of these occasions, at the end of a long June day, I stopped short on emerging from one of the plantations and coming into view of the house. What arrested me on the spot, with a shock much greater than any vision had allowed for, was the sense that my imagination had, in a flash, turned real. He did stand there, but high up, beyond the lawn, and at the very top of the tower to which, on that first morning, little Flora had conducted me. This tower was one of a pair, square, congruous, crenellated structure.
Oh, the rat!
Abbey, welcome in. Yeah, good to have you. You haven't missed much. I talked a little bit about the bad book and addressed some concerns people have had about it. Did our poetry, and we've just started back on The Turn of the Screw. I believe you were here for that first one, but the only part you've missed so far is the boys come to the house. There's been some talk of not telling the uncle and himself about the expulsion from the school and just thing. And our governess has been talking about her habit of walking in the evenings when the children have gone to bed in the farm gardens. That's where we're at now. Yeah. Welcome in. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you're doing well. Oh, and she has been imagining her head meeting a financing gentleman while on these walks, and has just spotted the very gentleman she has been imagining in one of the towers that the little girl led her to on the first day. That's where we're at. I should give you much. I'm doing grand, Abbe. I hope you're doing equally as well. Though apparently I am a little more evil than usual today, according to some people in chat. I still think people are overreacting about the book. But yeah. So. This tower was one of a pair, square, incongruous, crenellated structures. They were distinguished for some reason, though I could see little difference as the new and the old. They flanked opposite ends of the house, and was probably architectural absurdities, redeemed in a measure indeed, by not being wholly disengaged, nor of an art too pretentious, dating, in their gingerbread antiquity, from a romantic revival that were already a respectable past. I admired them, had fancies about them. We could all profit in a degree, especially when they loomed through the dust, by the grandeur of their actual battlements. Yet they were not at such a elevation that the figure I had so often invoked seemed most in place. It produced in me, this figure, in the clear twilight I remember, two distinct gasps of emotion, which were sharply the shock of my first, and that of my second surprise. My second were a violent perception of the mistake of my first. The man who met my eyes were not the person I had precipitately supposed. No. There came to me thus a bewilderment of vision, of which, after these years, there is no living view that I can hope to give. An unknown man in a lonely place is a permitted object for fear to a young woman, privately bred, and the figure that faced me were, a few more seconds assured me, as little anyone else I knew as it were the image that had been in my mind. I had not seen it in Harley Street. I had not seen it anywhere. The place, moreover, in the strangest way in the world, had on the instant, and by the very fact of his appearance, become a solitude. To me at least, making my statement here with a deliberation which I now have never made there, the old feeling of the moment returns. It was as if, while I took in what I did take in, all the rest of the scene had been stricken with death. I can hear again as I write the intense hush in which the sound of evening dropped. The rooks stopped cawing in the golden sky, and the friendly hour lost for the unspeakable minute all its voice. But there were no other change in nature, unless indeed there were a change that I saw with stranger sharpness. The gold was still in the sky, the clearness in the air, and the man who looked at me over the battlements was definite as a picture in a frame. And so I thought, with extraordinary quickness, of each person he might have been, and that he wasn't. We were confronted across our distance, quite long enough for me to ask myself with intensity who then he were, and I feel, as an effect of my inability to say, I wonder that in a few seconds become more intense. The great question of one of these is afterwards, I know, with regard to certain matters, the question of how long they have lasted. Well, this matter of mine, think what you will of it, lasted while I caught at a dozen possibilities, none of which made a difference, for the better that I could see, in their having been in the house, for how long above all, a person of whom I were in ignorance. I appear to have disappeared. Why's that, I wonder? But, fair enough, Wild. Good a time as any, I suppose. Wait for the hard train. Your elf. Oh, the music is dark. Oh. Okay, that sound played late. I'm still not visible by any account. What is going on? I do wonder. Ooh. Okay, music seems to have come back. I'm still invisible. Or at least I've turned into the sort of swirling mountain that indicates that my self is not being allowed to be, what's the term? Not perceived, projected? Broadcast, that's the word I'm looking for. I wonder why that is. I can't see any reason for it. This does just happen sometimes, doesn't it? Good. Well, anyway, that's, so we had that drink, but I have another one in case it didn't pick up. So you're out for a while. Oh, and there I am back again. I just want to make sure I fulfilled my obligations to you, I suppose. Strange, that. Anyhow. Yeah, thank you for the hard track, I do appreciate it. Now, where was we, that is? A person of whom I was in ignorance. It lasted while I just bridled a little with a sense of how my office seemed to require that there should be no such ignorance and no such person. It lasted while this visitant, at all events, and there were a touch of the strange freedom, as I remember, in the sign of familiarity of his wearing no hat, seemed to fix me, in his position, with just a question, just a scrutiny through the fading light, that his own presence provoked. And again I am gone. I don't think there's anything I can do about it, really. The music does. Well, it's just going to be one of those nights, we'll see how we go. Hopefully I'll come back. We was too far apart to call to each other. There were a moment at which, at shorter range, some challenge between us, breaking the hush, would have been the right result of our straight mutual stare. We were in one of the angles, in one of the angles, the one away from the house, very erect, as it struck me, with both hands on the ledge. So I saw him as I see the letters I form on this page, then, exactly, after a minute, as if to add to the spectacle, he slowly changed his place, passed, looking at me all hard the while, to the opposite corner of the platform. Yes, it was intense to me that during this transit He now took his eyes from me, and I could see at this moment the way his hand, as he went, moved from one of the crenellations to the next. He stopped at the other corner, but less long, and then even as he turned away, still markedly fixed me. He turned away. That were all I knew. And that's the end of chapter 3. I never know what to do in this situation, because it feels like I need to do something about not being able to be seen. And the music keeps cutting out as well, which is also a bad sign. Lamps is indicative that something in the wards is failing. But you know, it would be the night I was just talking about the spooky book being fine. Ooh, the wards are failing. I'm acting evil. Yeah. All comes together, I suppose. All comes together. Still. Right. Hopefully it'll work itself out. Let's see. Is there anything I can do to? Well, while I'm futzing around with this in the background, let's talk a little bit about the chapter. So the decision is made, it seems, not to do anything about this small child, or at least he's being kicked out of a school, for the time being. Not to address it to him or anything. It's made also the decision to, I don't know. Decision is made not to address it in any way or to talk to him about it. It's made to continue his lessons himself. I don't seem to make any choices about where to further his education, which does sort of indicate a lack of planning on their part, which is a little concerning. Other than that, there is some question of this figure in the garden, and the future, and also the fact that she can't really see a future for them is probably worth noting. Yeah. I don't know what else to say, really. Oh, there, I'm back. Okay. Not sure what caused that here. But yeah, it's a little concerned she can't see a future for them. It implies sort of lack of a plan for these children, which is a little concerning. Other than that, well, obviously there's a strange figure in the garden, which, given that these have been a collection of ghost stories, I'm assuming it's a ghost. But yeah. That's about all I have to say on the matter, really. So we'll, without any further ado, that being the case, I suppose we'll press on. Yeah. Sorry again about the issues we're having. Hopefully they'll sort themselves out, but you know, it goes sometimes. We are streaming from miles under the earth, which is not ideal. Yeah. Chapter 4. It was not that I did not wait on this occasion, the more, since I was as deeply rooted as shaken. Whether a secret at Blah, a mystery of Aldotho, or an insane and unmentionable relative kept in unsuspected confinement. I can't say how long I turned it over, or how long, in a confusion of curiosity and dread, I remained where I had had my collision. I only recall that, when I re-entered the house, darkness had quite closed in. Agitation in the interval, certainly, had held me and driven me, for I must, in circling about the place, have walked 3 miles. I would be later on so much more overwhelmed than this mere dawn of alarm like apparently a human ship. The most singular part of it, in fact, singular as the rest have been, the part I become, and the all aware of in meeting Mrs. Gross. This picture comes back to me in the general train. The impression as I received it on my return, the wide white-panelled space, bright in the lamplight, with its portrait of red carpets and the good, surprised look of my friend, which immediately told me she had missed me. It came to me straight away under her contact that with plain artness, mere relieved anxiety at my appearance, she knew nothing whatever that could bear upon the instant I had ready there for her. I had not suspected in advance that her comfortable face would pull me up, and I somehow measured the importance of what I had seen by my thus finding myself hesitate to mention it. Scarce anything in the old history seemed to me so odd as the fact that my real beginning of fear were one, as I must say, with the instinct of sparing my companion. On the spot accordingly, in the pleasant hall, with her eyes on me, for a reason that couldn't then have phrased, achieved an inward resolution. offered a vague pretext for my lateness and, with the idea of the beauty of the night and the very heavy dew on wet feet, went as soon as possible to my room. Here it were another affair. Here, for many days after, it were a queer affair enough. There was hours from day to day, at least there were moments snatched even from the circuit of clear duties, when I had to shut myself up to think. It weren't so much yet that I was more nervous than I could bear to be at that instant. To bear to be is that I was remarkably afraid of becoming so. But the truth I had now to turn over was simply and clearly the truth that I couldn't arrive at no account whatever of the visitor with whom I had been so inexplicably, and yet as it seemed to me so intimately concerned. Hey Naska, welcome in. We're working our way through Turn of the Screw today. What do you call it? The only thing you've really particularly missed so far is, she's decided not to tell or to make any real plans about the boys being expelled from the school, and has seen a mysterious figure in one of the towers while out walking the gardens. That's the only things that have real note that have happened since we've started. Yeah. But welcome in. I'm always happy to have you. It took me a little time to see that I might easily sound, without forms of inquiry and without exciting remark, any domestic complication. The shock I had suffered must have sharpened all my senses. I felt sure at the end of 3 days, and as the result of mere closer attention, I had not been practised upon by the servants, nor made the object of any game. Of whatever it were that I knew, nothing were around me. There were but the one same inference: someone had taken the liberty rather monstrous. That was what, repeatedly, I dipped into my room and locked the door to say to myself. We had been collectively subject to an intrusion. Some unscrupulous traveller, curious in old houses, had made his way in and stolen out as he come. If you had given me such a bold, hard stare, it were but part of his indiscretion. A good thing, after all, that we should surely see no more of him. This were not so good a thing, I admit. It is not to leave me to judge that what essentially made nothing else much signify was simply my charming work. My charming work was just my life with Miles and Flora, and through nothing could I so like it as through the feeling that to throw myself into it would have thrown myself out of my trouble. The attraction of my small charges were a constant joy, leading me to wonder afresh at the vanity of my original fears, the distaste I had begun by entertaining for the probable great prose of my office. There were to be no great prose, it appeared, and no long grind. So how could work be not charming that presented itself as a daily beauty? It were all the romance of the nursery and the poetry of the schoolroom. I don't mean by this, of course, that we studied only fiction and verse. I mean that I can express no otherwise the sort of interest my companions inspired. How can I describe that except by saying that instead of growing deadly used to them, and it's a marvel for a governess, I call the sisterhood to witness. I made constant fresh discoveries. This were one direction, assuredly, in which these discoveries stopped. Deep obscurity continued to cover the region of the boys' conduct at school. It being promptly given me, I have noted, to face that mystery without a pang. Perhaps even it would have been nearer the truth to say that without a word, he himself had cleared it up. He had made the old charge absurd. My conclusion bloomed there with the real rose flush of his innocence. You were only too fine and fair for the little worried, unclean school world, and he had paid a price for it. I reflected acutely that the sense of such individual differences, such superiority of quality, always on the part of the majority, which could include even stupid, sordid headmasters, turns infallibly to the vindictive. Both the children had a gentleness, it was their only fault, and it never made Miles a mutt, and kept them, how shall I express it, almost impersonal, certainly quite unpunishable. They was like those cherubs of the anecdote, who had, morally at any rate, nothing to whack. I remember feeling with Miles especially as if he had, as it were, nothing to call even an infinitesimal history. We expect of a small child scant enough anecdotes, but there were in this beautiful little boy something extraordinarily sensitive, yet extraordinarily happy, that, more than in any creature of his age I have seen, struck me as beginning anew each day. He had never for a second suffered. I took this as a direct disproof of his having really been chastised. Even when wicked, they would have caught it, and I should have caught it by the red bow. I should have found the trace, should have felt the wounds and the dishonour. I could reconstitute nothing at all, and he were therefore an angel. He never spoke of his school, never mentioned a comrade or a master, and I, for my part, were quite too much disgusted to allude to them. Of course, I were under the spell, and the wonderful part is that even at the time I perfectly knew I were. But I gave myself up to it. It were an antidote to any pain, and I had more pain than one. I were in receipt in these days of disturbing letters from home, that things was not going well. With the joy of my children, what things could in the world matter? That was the question I used to put to my scrappy retirements. I was dazzled by their loveliness. There were a Sunday to get on, when it rained with such force, and for so many hours, there could be no procession to church, in consequence of which, as the day declined, I had arranged with Mrs. Gross that, should the evening show improve, we would attend together in the late service. The rain happily stopped, and I prepared for our walk, which, though through the park by the good road to the village, would be a matter of 20 minutes. Coming downstairs to meet my colleague in the hall, I remember a pair of gloves that had required 3 stitches, and they had received them, with publicity perhaps not edifying, while I sat with the children at their tea, served on Sundays, by exception, in that cold, clean temple of mahogany and brass, the grown-up dining room. The gloves had been dropped there, and I turned in to recover them. They were grey enough, but the afternoon light still lingered, and it enabled me, on crossing the threshold, not only to recognise on a chair near the wide window, enclosed, the articles I wanted, but to become aware of a person on the other side of the window, looking straight in. One step into the room had sufficed. My vision were instantaneous. They were all there. The person looking straight in was a person who had already appeared to me. He appeared thus again with, I won't say a greater distinctness, for that were impossible, with a nearness that represented a forward stride in our intercourse, and made me, as I met him, catch my breath and turn cold. You were the same, and seen this time, as he had been seen before, from the waist up. The window, though, and the dining room were out on the ground floor, or going down to the terrace on which he stood. His face was close to the glass, and the effect of this better view was, strangely, just to show me how intense the former had been. He remained but a few seconds, long enough to convince me he also saw me, and recognised, but it was as if I had been looking at him for years, and had known him always. Something, however, happened this time that had not happened before. His stare into my face, through the glass and across the room, were deep and hard as them. It quitted me for a moment, during which I could still watch it, see it fixed successively on several other things. On the spot there came to me the added shock of a certitude that it were not for me he had come. He had come for someone else. The flash of this knowledge, for it were knowledge in the midst of dread, produced in me the most extraordinary effect, starting as I stood there, a sudden vibration of duty and courage. I say courage because I was beyond all doubt already far gone. I bounded straight out the door again, reached out of the house, got an instant on the drive, and, passing along the terrace as fast as I could rush, turned a corner and come full in sight. But it were in sight of nothing now. My visitor had vanished. I stopped, almost dropped with real relief at this, but I took in the old scene. I gave him time to reappear. I call it time, but how long was it? I can't speak to the purpose today of the duration of these things. That kind of measure must have left me. They could have lasted as they actually appeared to me. They couldn't have lasted as they actually appeared. They appeared to me to last. The terrace and the old place, the lawn and garden beyond it all I could see of this park were empty, with a great emptiness. There were shrubberies and big trees, but I remember that the great assurance I felt that none of them concealed him. You were there or were not them there. Not there if I didn't see him. I got hold of this then, instinctively, instead of returning as I had come, went to the window. It was confusedly present to me that I ought to place myself where he had stood. I did so. I applied my face to the pane and looked as he had looked into the room. As if at this moment to show me exactly what his range had been, Mrs. Groves, as I had done from himself just before, come in from the hall. With this I had the full range image of a repetition of what had already occurred. She saw me as I had seen my own visitor. She pulled up short as I had done. I gave her something of the shock that I had received. She turned white, and this made me ask myself if I had blanched as much. She stared, in short, and retreated just on my lines, and I knew she had just then passed out and come round to me, and I should presently meet her. I remained where I were while I waited. I thought more of things than one. I thought of more things than one. There's only one I take space to mention. I wondered why she should be scared. That's the end of chapter 4. I'm struggling with this text. I don't think it's me this time. I think the text itself is just a little bit denser than usual. Strange, I remember Henry James being quite readable. Not easy, but readable. I wonder if this is a bad example of I'm just out of practice of reading them. A quick drink of water there. Oh. But yeah, what to say about this chapter? Obviously the visions are repeating there, and there's some sort of apparition happening. It seems like Mrs. Gross knows something that she hasn't said yet. Yeah, and also the children are unsettlingly idyllic. Children aren't that perfect. There should be something weird and wrong about them happening. Like, just not because they're like strange or wrong, but just because children are a bit weird and wrong by default. So them being so perfect is throwing me off a bit. And I suppose we do know from the sort of intro that something's up with the children in this story, so or at the very least it's going to happen to them, so. But yeah. Pressing right along. All things still work. Chapter 5. Oh, she let me know as soon as, round the corner of the house, she loomed again into view. What in the name of goodness is the matter? She was now flushed and out of breath. I said nothing till she come quite near. With me? I must have made a wonderful face. Why, show it. You're as white as a sheet. You look awful. I considered. I could meet on this, without scruple any degree of innocence. My need to respect the bloom of Mrs. Gross had dropped without a rustle from my shoulders. If I wavered for the instant, it were not like what I'd kept back. I put out my hand to her and she took it. I held her hard, a little, liking to feel her close to me. There was a kind of support in the shy eve of her surprise. You came for me for church, of course, but I can't go. Has anything happened? Yes, you must know. You must know now. Did I look very queer? Not through this window? Dreadful. Well, I said, I've been frightened. Mrs. Gross's eyes expressed plainly that she had no wish to be, yet also that she knew too well our place not to be really to share with me any marked inconvenience. Well, quite settled that she must share. Just what you saw from the dining room window a minute ago was the effect of that. What I saw just before was much worse. Her hand tightened. What was it? An extraordinary man looking in. What extraordinary man? I haven't the least idea. Mrs. Gross gazed around in vain. Where has he gone? I know still less. Have you seen him before? Yes, once. In the old tower. She could only look at me harder. You mean he's a stranger? Oh, very much. He didn't tell me. No. For reasons. Now that you've guessed. Mrs. Gross's round eyes encountered this charge. I haven't guessed, she said very simply. How can I if you don't imagine? I don't in the very least. You're seeing him nowhere but up on the tower, and on this spot just now. Mrs. Gross looked round again. What was he doing on the tower? Only standing there and looking down at me. She thought a moment. Were you a gentleman? I found that I had no need to think. No. She gazed in deeper wonder. No. And nobody about the place. Nobody from the village. Nobody. Nobody. I didn't tell you, but I made sure. She breathed a vague relief. This were, oddly, so much to the good. It only went indeed a little way. But if he isn't a gentleman, what is he? He's a horror. A horror. He's... God help me if I know what he is. Mrs. Grass looked around once more. She fixed her eyes on the duskier distance, and then, pulling herself together, turned with me with full inconsequence. It's time we should be at church. Oh, I'm not fit for church. I want to do you any good. I won't do them. I nodded at the house. Children. I can't leave them now. You're afraid. I spoke boldly. I'm afraid of him. Mrs. Gross's face showed me at this, for the first time, the faraway faint glimmer of a consciousness more acute. I somehow made it out in the delayed dawn of an somehow made out in it the delayed dawn of an idea. I myself would not given her, and that were quite as yet, and that were quite as yet quite obscure to me. It comes back to me that I thought instantly of this as something I could get from her, and I felt it to be connected with the desire she presently showed to know more. When was it on the tower? About the middle of the month. The same almost as dark, said Mrs. Gross. Oh no, not nearly. I saw him as I see you. And how did he get in? And how did he get out? I laughed. I had no opportunity to ask him. This evening, you see, I paused. He has not been able to get in. You only peeps? I hope it will be confined to that. She had now let go of my hand. She turned away a little. I waited an instant, and I got brought out. Go to church. Goodbye. I must watch. Slowly she faced me again. Do you fear for them? We met in another long look. Don't you? Instead of answering, she came nearer to the window and, for a minute, applied her face to the glass. You see how he could see? You see how he could see, I went on. She didn't move. How long was he here? Till I came out to meet him. Mrs. Gross at last turned round, and there was still more in her face. Well, he couldn't have come out. Neither could I laughed again, but I did come. I have my duty. So have I mine, she replied, after which she added, What's he like? I've been dying to tell you, but he's like nobody. Nobody, she echoed. He has no hat. And seeing in her face that she already in this, with a deeper dismay, found a touch of picture, I quickly added stroke. He has red hair, very red, close curling and a pale face. Long in shape, with straight good features, and a little, rather queer whiskers, that are as red as his hair. His eyebrows are somehow darker. They look particularly arched, and as if they might move a good deal. His eyes are sharp, strange, awfully, but I only know clearly that they're rather small and very fixed. His mouth is wide, his lips are thin. Except for his little whiskers, he's quite clean shaven. He gives me a sort of sense of looking like an actor. An actor? They're impossible to resemble one less, at least than Mrs. Gross case. At least than Mrs. Gross at the moment. The Mrs. Gross at that moment. I've never seen one, but I suppose then. He's tall, attractive, erect, I continued. Never a gentleman. My companion's face had blanched as I went on. Her round eyes started and her mild mouth gaped. A gentleman, she gasped, confounded, stupefied. A gentleman, he. You know him then? She visibly tried to hold herself. But he is handsome. I saw the way to help her. Remarkably. Undressed, in somebody else's clothes. They're smart, but they're not his own. She broke into an artful, affirmative groan. They're the masters. I caught it up. You do know him? She faltered but a second. Quint, she cried. Quint? And I'll pause here because the ads is about to come on, and that's a pretty good stopping point for a little bit of a cliffhanger. So, well, getting into the flow of things a bit more now. But yeah, I'll have my quick swallow of water and then we'll do a little bit of thinking. So. And that's the ads on the side. What is there to say so far about this story? Other than that, he's given me trouble. I think I actually was struggling with it the first time too. I gave it up pretty quick, although I think that might have been as much me as it was the story itself. But I guess I was in a bad place, and the story was also giving me trouble and would compound and make it harder. But yeah, the language is giving me issue. I think a lot of the way it's written. It's not particularly old-fashioned necessarily, but it's very how do you say, verbose? I almost want to say eloquent, but it's not eloquent. It's just formal, heavily descriptive. It sort of flows in an odd way that is tripping me up a bit. Which I guess might be a sort of period dialogue, or maybe a specific regional period dialogue that is meant to be given a sense of the place. Yeah, fair enough. I'll sit up straight while I finish my little thing, and for the start of the next chapter, fair play what? Ooh, it feels weird to be doing that while I'm just talking. Like when I'm reading the book, I can I'm hold the book up, but now I'm just looking forward. I feel like I'm reading the evening news. News today: turn of the screws, local rat trouble with reading. Yeah, but something about the language is throwing me off. I don't know, it's weird. I think probably it would be easier if I was just it's one of those things that wouldn't give me a trouble if I was reading it to myself. But because it flows in a way that I don't really think or speak it throws me off because I'm like, oh yeah, this like sentence will flow this way, and then I perhaps start reading, but then the flow is different, like bam, and it just knocks me out. There's also something unsettling about it, which. I mean, it isn't a mark against it. It's like this is a ghost story. It's meant to have something spooky to it, and the atmosphere is definitely weird, throwing me a bit. But the way it's doing it is a bit odd. It's more unnerving than a lot of these. I mean, James's ghost stories do a good job of being unnerving, and there's definitely some weird vibes you get. Like what was it? One of the. Was it Private Life? One of the well, maybe it was one of the earlier ones we did, but the one about that was the Jolly Corner. That was it. Where that fellow was just going through his own house in the dark and being weird. That one had a distinct weird vibe to it, but it wasn't throwing me off like this. This is like, because I guess it was that it was just distinctly unsettling, right? Like it was normal right up until he was doing very weird stuff, and then it was all weird. But here, there's just something slightly off. You know, there's something in the background. The kids do right. The choices they make are sort of weird and. It all feels a bit out of sorts in a way that I think is deliberate. It's just throwing me off a little bit. I don't know. We're about to come back, so we'll push on. Maybe another hour will clear some more. I'll have my quick drink. And we press on. So then. I cut it up. You do know him. She thought a bit a second. Quint, she cried. Quint? Peter Quint. His own man, his valet, when he were here. The master was. Escaping still, but meeting me, she pieced it all together. He never wore his hat, but he did wear it well. There were waistcoats missed. They was both here last year. The master went, and Quint were alone. I frowned, but out and alone. Alone? Alone with us. And it's from a deeper depth. In charge, she added. What became of him? She hung fast so long that I was still more mystified. He went too, she brought out at last. Went where? Her expression at this became extraordinary. God knows where. He died. Died? Out on the street. She seemed fairly to square herself, plant herself more firmly and express the wonder of it. Yes, Mr. Quint's dead. Man, there's a pretty explicit view of a ghost, at least the idea of one. But yeah, strange. I mean, I feel like there should be more I should say about this chapter, but it's actually, for all that these have taken me a while and I'm struggling a bit with them, that was like a very formulaic chapter, right? You see the ghost once, and then again you see it up closer, and you find out, ooh, it's a dead man. Not too much to say about it, so. We'll press right. We'll press right on. Chapter 6. It took, of course, more than that particular passage to place us together in presence of what we had now to live with as we could. My dreadful my dreadful liability to impressions of the order so vividly exemplified, and my companion's knowledge henceforth, a knowledge half consternation and half compassion of that liability. There had been this evening, after the revelation that left me for an hour or so prostrate, there had been for either of us no attendance on any service but a little service of tears and vows, but prayers and promises of climax to the series of mutual challenges and pledges that had straightway ensued on our retreating together to the schoolroom and shutting ourselves up there, of everything out. The result of our having everything out was simply to reduce our situation to the last rigour of its elements. She herself would see nothing, not the shadow of a shadow, and nobody in the house but the governess were in the governess's plot, and she accepted without directly impugning my sanity the truth as I gave it to her, and ended by showing me on the ground an awestruck tenderness, a deference to my more than questionable privilege, of which the very breath has remained with me as that of the sweetest human charities. What was settled between us accordingly that night, that we thought we might bear things together, and I was not even sure that in spite of her exemptions it was she that had the best of the burden. I knew at this hour, I think, as well as I knew later, what I was capable of meeting to shelter my pupils, but it took me some time to be wholly sure of what my own honest comrade were prepared for to keep terms with so stiff an agreement. I was queer company enough, quite as queer as the company I received, but I trace over what we went through, I see how much common ground we must have found in the one idea that by good fortune could steady us. It was the idea the second moment that led me straight out, as I may say, of the inner chamber of my dread. I had to take the air in the court, at least, and there Mrs. Gross could join me. Perfectly can I recall now the particular way strange came to me before we separated for the night. We had gone over and over every feature of what I had seen. He was looking for someone else, you see, someone who was not you. He was looking for little Miles. A pretentious clearness now possessed me. That's whom he was looking for. But how do you know? I know. My exultation grew. And you know, my dear. She didn't deny this, but I required, I felt, not even so much telling as that. She took it up again in a moment. What if he should see him? Little Miles, that's what he wants. She looked immensely scared again. The child! Heaven forbid. The child! Heaven forbid. The man! He wants to appear to them. He might ruin awful conception, and yet somehow I couldn't keep it at bay any more. Which, moreover, as we lingered there, was what I succeeded in practically proving. I had an absolute certainty that I should see again what I had already seen. Some within me said that by offering myself bravely as the sole subject of such experience, by accepting, by inviting, by surmounting it all, I should serve as an expiatory victim and guard the tranquillity of the rest of the household. The children especially I should thus fence about and resolutely save. Recalled one of the last things I said that night to Mrs. Gross. It does strike me that my pupils have never mentioned. She looked at me hard as I musingly pulled up. His having been here and the time they were with him, the time they were with him and his name, his presence, his history in any way. They've never alluded to it. Oh, the little lady doesn't remember. She never heard or knew the circumstances of his death. I thought with some intensity. Perhaps not, but Miles would remember. Miles would know. And don't try him, from Mrs. Gross. I returned her the look she had given me. Don't be afraid, I continued to think. It is rather odd, but he has never spoken of it, never by the least reference. And you tell me they were great friends? Oh, it wasn't him, Mrs. Gross said Mrs. Gross with emphasis declared. It was Quint's own fancy, to play with him, I mean, to spoil him. She paused a moment and added, Quint was much too free. This gave me straight from my vision of his face, such a face, a sudden sickness of disgust. Too free with my boy, too free with everyone. I forbore for the moment to analyse the description further than by the reflection that, The part applied to several of the members of the household. Of the half dozen maids and men who were still our small colony, there were everything for our apprenticeship and for apprehension in the lucky fact that no discomfortable legend, no perturbation of scullions had ever, within anyone's memory, attached to the kind of old place. It had neither bad name nor ill fame, and Mrs. Gross, most apparently, only desired to cling to me in a quaking silence. I even put her, the very last thing of all, to the test. It all when, at midnight, she had her hand on the schoolroom door as they'd leave. I have it from you, then, for it's of great importance that he was definitely and admittedly bad. Oh, not admittedly. I knew it, but the master didn't. And you never told him? Well, he didn't like the tale-bearing. He hated complaints. You were terribly short with anything of that kind, and if people were all right to him, he wouldn't be bothered with more. This square will enough with my impression of him. He was not a trouble-loving gentleman, nor so very particular, perhaps, about some of the company he himself kept. All the same, I pressed to inform. I promise you I would have told. She felt my discrimination. I dare say I were wrong. Really, I were afraid. Afraid of what? The things the man could do. Quint was so clever. He was so deep. I took this in still more than I probably should. You weren't afraid of anything else? Not of his effect? His effect, she repeated, with a face of anguish, and waiting while I thought. On innocent little precious lives. They were in your charge. No, they weren't in mine, she roundly and distressfully returned. The master believed in him and placed him here because he was supposed to be quite in health, and the country air so good for him. So he had everything to say, yes, should I have it, even about them. Them, that creature, had to smother a kind of owl, and you could bear it. No, I couldn't, and I can't now. The poor woman burst into tears. A rigid control from the next day was, as I have said, to follow them. Yet how often and how passionately, for a week, we come back together of their subject. Much as we had discussed it that Sunday night, I were in the immediate later hours especially, it may be imagined wherever I slept, still haunted with the shadow of something she had not told me. I myself kept back with nothing. There were word Mrs. Gross kept back, I was sure. Moreover, by morning, this were not from a failure of frankness, because on every side there were fears. It seemed to me, indeed, in raking it all over, that by the time the morrow's sun were on, I restlessly read into the facts before us almost cruel, all the meaning they was to receive from subsequent and more cruel occurrences. What they gave to me, above all, was just the sinister figure of the living man. The dead one would keep a while. The months he had continuously passed at Blar, which added up but made a formidable stretch. The limit of this evil time had arrived only when on the dawn of a winter's morning Peter Quint was found, by a labourer going early to work, stone dead on the road from the village. The catastrophe explained, superficially at least, by a visible wound to his head, such a wound as might have been produced, and on final evidence had been, by a fatal slip in the dark, and after leaving the public house, on the steepest shicey slope of wrong path altogether, at the bottom of which he lay. The icy slope, the turn, mistaken at night and in liquor, accounted for much, practically in the end, and after the inquest and boundless charter, for everything. But there had been matters in his life, strange passages and perils, secret disorders, vices more than suspected, that would have accounted for a good deal more. I scarce know how to put my story into words that should be credible, picturing my state of mind. But I were, in these days, literally able to find the joy in that extraordinary flight of heroism the occasion demanded me. The occasion demanded of me. I now saw that I had been asked for a service admirable and difficult. There would be a greatness in letting it be seen, in the right quarter. I could succeed where many another girl might have failed. It were an immense help to me, I confess. I rather applaud myself as I look back. I saw my response so strongly and so simply. I was there to protect and defend the little creatures in the world, the most bereaved and the most lovable, the appeal of whose helplessness had suddenly become the only too explicit, a deep constant ache of one's own engaged affection. We was cut off, really, together. We was united in our danger. They had nothing but me, and but I had them. It were, in short, a magnificent chance. The chance presented itself to me in an image richly material. I was to scream. I was to stand before them. The more I saw, the less they would. I began to watch them in a stifled suspense, a disguised tension that might well, had it continued too long, have turned into something like madness. What saved me, as I now see, that it turned into another matter altogether. It didn't last as a suspense. It was superseded by horrible proofs. Proofs, I say, yes, from the moment I really took hold. This moment dated from an afternoon hour that I happened to spend in the grounds with the younger of my pupils alone. We had left Miles indoors, on the red cushion of a deep windowed seat. He wished to finish a book, and I had been glad to encourage a purpose so laudable in a young man, whose only defect were a certain ingenuity of restlessness. His sister, on the contrary, had been alert to come out, and I strolled with her half an hour, seeing the shade, for the sun was still high, the day exceptionally warm. I grew aware afresh with her as we went of how, like her brother, she contrived, with the charming thing in both children, to let me alone without appearing to drop me, and accompany me without appearing to oppress. They were never important, and yet never listless. My attraction to them all really went to seeing them amuse themselves immensely without me. This was a spectacle they seemed actively to prepare, and employed me as an active admirer. I walked in a world of their invention. There had been no occasion when to draw open mine, so that my time would taken only would be in for them, and some remarkable person or thing that the game of the moment required, that were merely, thanks to my superior, my exalted stamp, and happy and highly distinguished in censure. I forget what I was on the present occasion. I only remember that I was something very important and very quiet, and that Flora were playing very hard. We was on the edge of the lake, and, as we had lately begun geography, the lake with the Sea of Azov. Suddenly, amid these elements, I become aware that on the other side of the Sea of Azov, we had an interested spectator. The way this knowledge gathered in me was the strangest thing in the world. The strangest this is, that is, except the very much stranger in which it quickly merged itself. I had sat down with a piece of work, for I was something or other that could sit, on the old stone bench which overlooked the pond, and, in this position, I was going to take in with certitude, and yet without direct vision, the presence, a good way off, of a third person. The old trees, the thick shrubbery, made a great and pleasant scene. It all suffused with the brightness of the hot, wet, still hour. There was no ambiguity in anything, none whatever, at least, in the conviction I, from one moment to another, found myself forming, as to what I should see straight before me and across the lake as a consequence of raising my eyes. There was attached at this juncture to the stitching in which I were engaged, and I can feel once more the spasm of my effort not to move them till I should have steadied myself as to be able to make up my mind what to do. There were an alien object in view, a figure whose right of presence I instantly and passionately questioned. I recollect counting over perfectly the possibilities, reminding myself that nothing was more natural, for instance, than the appearance of one of the men about the place, or even of a messenger, a postman or tradesman's boy, from the village. That reminder has as little effect on my practical certitude as I were conscious, still even without looking, of its having upon the character and attitude of our visitor. Nothing was more natural than these things should be the other things they absolutely were not. Of the positive identity of the apparition I would assure myself as soon as that small clock of my courage would have ticked out the right second. Meanwhile, with an effort that were already sharp enough, I transferred my eyes to little Flora, who at the moment were about 10 yards away. My heart had stood still for an instant with the wonder and terror of the question whether she too would see it, and I held my breath while I waited for what cry from her. What some sudden innocent sight, either of interest or alarm, would tell me. I waited, but nothing came. Then, in the first place, there is something more dire in this, I feel, than in anything I have to relate. I was determined by a sense that within a full minute, all spontaneous sounds from her had dropped, and in the second by the circumstance Also within the minute she had, in her play, turned her back to the water. This were her attitude when I at last looked at her. Looked with a confirmed conviction that we were still together, under direct personal notice. She had picked up a small, flat piece of wood, which happened to have in it a little hole that had evidently suggested to her the idea of sticking in another fragment that might have figured as a mast to make the thing a boat. In the second morsel, as I watched her, she was very markedly and intently attempting to tighten in its place. My apprehension of what she was doing sustained me, so that after some seconds I felt that I was ready for more. Then I sifted my eyes. I faced what I had to face. That's the end of chapter 6. I'll pause here to have a quick swallow of water. My jaw's giving me some grief again. But yeah. So what's there to say then? This idea of being a a shield against these things, a screen for these children, of taking all the weary weight of the ghost upon herself, is an odd notion for her to have. It's not unheard of, sort of a sacrificial protector, but the way in which she's doing it is strange. She seems to have sort of intuited these rules regarding how these ghosts work, and is functioning on the belief that they do as she believes they will, without really considering why she believes that. Something of an odd one. I'm trying to think what else there is to say, really, but nothing springs to mind too immediately. Yeah. Other than, again, I'm really finding the actual writing in this quite difficult. I don't know why, but I'm getting lost a little bit. Still, I'll press on. Chapter 7. I got hold of Mrs. Gross as soon after this as I could. I can give no intelligible account of how I fought out the interval, but I still hear myself cry as I faintly threw myself into her arms. They know! It's too monstrous! They know! They know! What on earth? I felt her incredibly as she held me. Why, all that we know, and heaven knows what more besides. Then as she released me, I made it out the while. Made it out perhaps, only now with full coherency even to myself. 2 hours ago in the garden, I could scarce articulate. Flora saw. Mrs. Gross took me as she might have taken took this as she might have taken a blow in the stomach. She's told you, she added. Not a word. That's the horror. She's kept it to herself. The child of 8, that child. Unutterable still for me with the stupefaction of it. Mrs. Gross, of course, could only gape at the wonder. And how do you know? I was there. I saw with my eyes, saw she was perfectly aware. You mean aware of him? No, of her. I was conscious as I spoke. I looked at prodigious things, for I got the slow reflection of them in my companion's face. Another person, this time, but a figure of quite unmistakable horror and evil. A woman in black, pale and dreadful, such an air also, and such a face, on the other side of the lake. I was there with the child, quiet for the hour. In the midst of it she came. Came how? From where? And where they come from? She just appeared and stood there, not so near. Without coming nearer. Oh, for the effect and feeling she might have been as close as you. My friend, with an odd impulse, fell back a step. Was she someone you'd seen before? Never. Someone the child has. Someone you have. In the show I had thought it all out. My predecessor. The one who died. Miss Jessel. Miss Jessel. You don't believe me? I pressed. She turned right and left in her distress. How can you be sure? Miss drew from me, in the state of my nerves, a flash of impatience. Ask Flora, she saw. But I had no sooner spoken than I caught myself up. No, for God's sake, don't. She'll say she isn't. She'll lie. Mrs. Gross were not too bewildered instantly to protest. Ah, but how can you? Because I'm clear. Flora doesn't want me to know. It's only then to spare you. No, no, there are depths and depths. The more I go over it, the more I see in it. And the more I see in it, the more I fear. I don't know what I don't see, what I don't fear. Mrs. Gross tried to keep up with me. You mean you're afraid of seeing her again? Well, that's nothing now. I'll explain. It's of not seeing her. My companion only looked wan. I don't understand. Why, it's the child may keep it in, and that the child assuredly will without me knowing it. At the image of this possibility, Mrs. Gross, for a moment, collapsed. Presently, to pull herself together again, as from the positive force of the sense of what, should we yield within an inch, there would really be to give way to. Dear, dear, we must keep our heads. And after all, she didn't mind it. She even tried a grim joke. Perhaps she likes it. Like such a thing, a scrap of an infant? Isn't it just a proof of her blessed innocence? My friend bravely inquired. She bought me, for the instant, around almost. Oh, we must cluster to that. We must cling to it. If it isn't proof of what you say, it's proof of God knows what. The woman's a horror of horrors. Mrs. Gross at this fixed her eyes a minute on the ground, then at last rested them. Tell me how you know, she said. And you admit it's what she was, I cried. Tell me how you know, my friend simply repeated. No, by seeing her, by the way she looked. At you, do you mean, so wickedly? Do you mean, no, I could have borne that. She gave me never a glance, she only fixed the child. Mrs. Gross tried to see him. Fixed her? How, with such awful eyes? She stared at mine as if they might really have resembled them. Do you mean a dislike? God help us, no, something much worse. Worse than dislike. And after indeed at a loss. The determination, indescribable, the kind of fury of intention. I made her turn pale. Intention? To get hold of her, Mrs. Gross. Mrs. Gross, her eyes just lingering on mine, gave a shudder, and walked to the window. And while she stood there looking out, I completed my statement. That's what Flora knows. After a little she turned round. The person were in black, you see. In mourning, rather poor, almost shabby mourning, but yes, with extraordinary beauty. I now recognised to what I had at last, stroke by stroke, brought the victim of my confidence. She quite visibly weighed this. Oh, handsome, very, very, I insisted. Wonderfully handsome, but infamous. She came slowly back to me. Mrs. Jesson was infamous. She once more took my hand, and then both her own, holding as tight as if to fortify me against the increase of alarm I might draw from this disclosure. It was both infamous, she said finally. So for a little while we faced it once more together. I found absolutely a degree of help in seeing it now so straight. I appreciate, I said, the great decency of your not having hitherto spoken. The time has certainly come to give me the whole thing. She appeared to assent to this, but still only a silence, seeing which I went on. I must have it now. What did she die? Come, there was something between them. They were everything. In spite of the difference, their rank, their condition. She brought it woefully out. She were a lady. Turned it over, I again saw. Yes, she was a lady. And he was so dreadfully below, said Mrs. Gross. I felt that I doubtless needn't press too hard in such company on the place of a servant on the scale. There were nothing to prevent an acceptance of my companion's own measure of my predecessor's abasement. There were a way to deal with that, and I dealt the more readily from my full vision. On the evidence of our employer's late, good-looking own man, impudent, assured, spoiled, depraved. The fellow was a hound. Mrs. Gross considered as if it were perhaps a little case for a sense of shades. I'd never seen one like him. He did what he liked. With her? With them all. It was as if now, in my friend's own arms, Miss Jessel had again appeared. It seemed, at any rate, for the instance, the trace of their evocations of her. I seemed, at any rate, for an instant, to trace their evocations of her as distinctly as I had seen her by the pond. I brought out with decision. It must have been also what she wished. Mrs. Gross's face signified that it had been indeed. She said at the same time, Poor woman, she paid for it. And do you know what she died of? I asked. No, I know nothing. I wanted to know. They were glad enough I didn't. So I wanted not to know. They were glad enough I didn't. And I thanked heaven she were well out of this. But you had your idea. A real reason for leaving? Oh, yes. As to that, she couldn't have stayed, fancied here for a governess. And afterwards I imagine, I still imagine. What I imagine is dreadful. Not so dreadful as what I do, I replied, on which I must have shown her, as I were indeed too conscious, a form of miserable defeat. It brought out again all her compassion for me, and at the renewed touch of her kindness my power to resist broke down. I burst, as I had the other time made her burst, into tears. She took me to her motherly breast, and my lamentation overflowed. I don't do it, I sobbed in despair. I don't save or shield them. It's far worse than I dreamed. They're lost. That's the end of chapter 7. Well, I was just commenting there on the ghost rules at the end of the last chapter, and here it is, proof that she is wrong about them. And we have two dreadful figures, a lord's man and a governess, who are apparently both infamous. Well, there's only implication here. I think what is being hinted at is that this lady governess got with child on this other man and had to leave on account of that, which would make her death more upsetting and tragic, but also her ghost appearance somewhat more sinister, especially with interested children. There's quite a lot of folklore around motherhood and ghosts, and very little of it very pleasant. Still. Pressing on. Got to maintain momentum tonight, I think. Chapter 8. What I had said to Mrs. Gross was true enough. There were in the matter I had put before her depth and possibilities that I lacked resolution to sound. So when we met once more in the wonder of it, we were of a common mind about the duty of resistance to extravagant fancies. We were to keep our heads if we should keep nothing else, difficult indeed as that might be for the face of it. For the face of all that, in our prodigious experience, seemed least to be questioned. Late that night, while the house slept, we had another talk in my room, where she went all the way with me as to it being both beyond doubt that I had seen exactly what I had seen. I found that to keep her thoroughly in the grip of this, I had only to ask her how, if I hadn't made it up, I come to be able to give of each of the persons appearing to me a picture disclosing to the last detail their special marks, and a portrait on the exhibition of which she had instantly recognised and named them. She wished, of course, more blamed the one, to sink the old subject, and I was quick to assure that my own interest in it had now violently taken the form of a search for the way to escape from it. I closed with her cordially on the article, the likelihood that with recurrence we took for granted, I should get used to my dangers, distinctly for professing that my personal exposure had suddenly become the least of my discomforts. By my new suspicion that were intolerable, and even this new to that complication, the later hours of the night had brought a little ease. On leaving her, after my first outbreak, I had of course returned to my pupils, associating the right remedy for my dismay with the sense of their charm, which I had already recognised as a resource I could positively cultivate, which had never failed me yet. I had simply, in other words, plunged afresh into Flora's special society, and become aware, in almost a luxury, she could put her little conscious hand straight up on the spot that ached. She looked at me in a sweet speculation, and had accused me to my face of having cried. I suppose the ugly signs of it brushed away, but I could literally, at the time of all events, rejoice under this fabulous charity. They had not entirely disappeared. To gaze into the depths of blue of the child's eyes and pronounce their loveliness a trick of premature cunning would be guilty of a cynicism in preference to which I naturally preferred to abjure my judgment and, so far as might be, my agitation. I couldn't abjure for merely wanting to, but I could repeat to Mrs. Cross, as I did there over and over in the small hours, were, with our small friends' voices in the air, their pressures on one's arm, and their fragrant faces against one's cheek, everything felt to the ground but the incapacity in their beauty. It were a pity somehow to settle this all at once. I had equally to re-enumerate the signs of subtlety that in the afternoon by the lake had made a miracle of my show of self-possession. It were a pity to be obliged to re-investigate the certitude of the moment itself, repeat how it had come to me as a revelation that the inconceivable communion I then surprised must have been for both parties a matter of habit. It were a pity I should have had to quaver out again. The reason for my not having in my delusion as much questioned that the little girl saw our visit even as I actually saw Mrs. Grass herself, and that she wanted, by just so much as she did thus see, to make me suppose she didn't, and at the same time, without showing anything, arrive at a guess as to whether I myself did. It were a pity I needed to recapitulate the potential little activities, by which she sought to divert my attention. The perceptible increase in movement, the great intensity of play, the singing, the gabbling of noises, nonsense, and the invitation to run. Yet if I had not indulged to prove there were nothing in it in this review, I should have missed the 2 or 3 dim elements of comfort that still remained to me. I shouldn't, for instance, have been able to asseverate to my friend that I was certain, which was so much to the good, that I at least had not betrayed myself. I shouldn't have been prompted by stress of need, by desperation of mind. I scarce knew what to call it, and invoked such further aid to the intelligence as might spring from pushing my colleague fairly to the wall. She told me bit by bit, under pressure, a great deal. The small shifty spot on the wrong side of it still sometimes brushed my brow like the wings of a bat. I remember how on this occasion, for the sleeping house and the concentration alike of our danger and our watch seemed to help. I felt the importance of giving the last jerk to the curb. I don't believe anything so horrible, I recollect saying. No, let us put it definitely, my dear, that I don't. But if I did, you know, there's a thing I should require now, just without sparing you the least bit more. Or not a scrap. Come, to get out of you. What was it you had in mind when, in our own distress, before Miles came back over the letters from his school, he said under my insistence that you didn't pretend for him that he hadn't literally ever been bad. He's not truly ever, in these weeks that I myself have lived with him, so closely watched him. He's been an imperturbable little prodigy of delightful, lovable goodness. Therefore you might perfectly have made the calm for him if you had not, as it happened, claimed for him if you had not, as it happened, seen exception to take. What was your exception? To what passage of your personal observations of him did you refer? It was a straight question enough, but levity were not unknown. In any case, I had before the grey dawn admonished us to separate, got my answer. My friend had in mind proved immediately to the purpose, but neither more nor less than the particular fact that for a period of several months, Quint and the boy had been perpetually together. Were indeed a very appropriate item of evidence of her having ventured to criticise the property, to hint at the incongruity of so close an alliance, and even to go so far on the subject as a frank overture that Miss Jezebel would take. Miss Jezebel had, with a very iron manner about it, requested her to mind her business, and the good woman had, on this directly approached little Miles. What she then said to him, since I pressed, was that she liked to see young gentlemen not forget their station. I pressed again, of course, the closer for that. You reminded him that Quint was only a base menial. As you might say, it was his answer for one thing that was bad. For another thing, I waited. You repeated your words to Quint? No, not that. It's just what he wouldn't, she said, still impressed on his... He wouldn't. She could still impress on me. I wasn't sure at any rate, she added, that he didn't, but he denied certain occasions. What occasions? They had been about together quite as if Quint were his tutor, and a very grand one, Miss Jezebel only for the little lady. When he had gone off with a fellow, and spent hours with him. He then prevaricated about it. He then prevaricated about it. He said he hadn't. The scent were clear enough to cause me to add in the moment. I see, he lied. Oh, Mrs. Gross wondered. This was a suggestion that it didn't matter, which indeed she backed up by a further remark. You see, after all, Miss Jessel didn't mind. She didn't forbid him. I considered. Did he put that to you as a justification? She dropped again. No, he never spoke of it. Never mentioned her in connection with Quint. She saw, visibly flushing, where I was coming out. Well, he didn't show anything, she denied. He denied, she repeated. He denied. Lord, how I pressed her now, so that you could see he knew what was between them two wretches. I don't know, Bourne wailed. You do know, you dear thing, I replied. Only you haven't my dreadful boldness of mind, and you keep back out of timidity, out of modesty and delicacy. Even the impression of the past, when you had, without my aid, to flounder about in silence, must have all made you miserable. But I shall get it out of you yet. There's something in the boy that suggested to you, I continued, is covering and concealing their relation. Or he could prevent your learning the truth, I dare say. But heavens! I fell with extreme vehemence a thinking. Well, it shows that they must, to that extent, have succeeded in making of him. And of them that's not nice now, Mrs. Grossbull lugubriously pleaded. And I wonder you look queer, I persisted. And I mentioned to you the letter from his school. I doubt if I looked as queer as you, she retorted, with homely force. And if he were so bad, and that comes to, how is he such an angel now? Yes, indeed. If he was a fiend at school, how? Well, I said in my tone, you must put it to me again, but I shall not be able to tell you for some days. Only put it to me again, I cried in a way that made my eyes stare. There are directions in which I mustn't for the present let myself go. Meanwhile, I returned to her first example, one which she had just previously referred to the boy's happy capacity for the occasional slip. If Quint, and your remonstrance at the time you speak of, was a base menial, one of the things Miles said to you, I find myself guessing was that you were another. Again, her admission was so adequate that I continued. And you forgave him that, wouldn't you? Oh, yes. We exchanged there in all the stillness, a sound of the oddest amusement. Then I went on. At all events, while he was with the man, Miss Flower with the woman, it suited them all. It suited me too. I felt only too well, by which I mean that it suited exactly the particular deadly view I were in the very act of forbidding myself to entertain. I so far succeeded in checking the expression of this view. I will throw just here a further light on it, may be offered by the attention of my final observation, Mrs. Gross. His having lied and been impudent are, I confess, less engaging specimens than I had hoped to have from you at the outbreak of him, a little lateral man. Still, I mused, they must do, for they make me feel more than ever that I must watch. It made me blush the next minute to see in my friend's face how much more unreservedly she had forgiven him, and her anecdote struck me as pointing out on my own tenderness in any way to do. This remark when the schoolroom's door closed. This remarked when, as at the schoolroom's door, she quitted me. Surely you don't accuse him of carrying on an intercourse that he conceals from me. I remember that until further evidence I now accuse nobody. Then before shutting her out to go back by another passage to her own place, I must just wait. I wound up. Okay, I'm definitely struggling here. I mentioned my jaw's starting to give me grief, and that's throwing me off a bit. Yeah. Sorry, I should say that was the end of chapter 7. Sorry, chapter 8, rather. Yeah, I'll have a quick drink of water there. I really thought I was starting to get over the jaw pain. Don't know what's coming on with it. Really getting to me though. Hurts. I've had something for it, but it seems to be getting through it a bit, which is annoying. I can't have anything more for a little bit longer, so. What's there to say about this chapter? The idea that Miles has lied about something, despite being a perfect little angel, seems to be a very distressing idea for these two ladies, which... Again, it's weird how perfect these kids are, is what's getting to me. I don't know that it's supposed to be. I think, given the fact that they're so surprised he lied, it's maybe supposed to be that the lying part is the weird part. But the idea of there being this kid who is so perfect, so universally good, despite being like 8 years old, he never so much as tells a small lie or conceals anything or does anything wrong at all. He's to my mind more unnatural than that he would tell a lie every now and then. Kids are liars. Natural. Try and conceal things, you know? It's part of learning to grow up. The odd thing's distinctly odd there, but I suspect it's not the thing that I'm supposed to find out, if you know what I mean. Oh, Lord Almighty. Right. Right then. Pressing on. I've got a point that I want to get to tonight, and I'm probably not going to finish this, I think, because my jury's giving me grief again, and I'm definitely not reading it as well as I could be. But there's a point I want to get to tonight where I'll feel comfortable that I can finish it in another sitting. So we'll get to that point. I think will be our goal. So, Chapter 9. I waited and waited, and the days took as they elapsed something from my consternation. Ain't you, Blake? Your presence is a balm to me. I waited and waited. The days took as they elapsed something from my consternation. A very few of them, in fact, passing in constant sight of my pupils, without a fresh incident, sufficed to give to grievous fancies, and even to odious memories, of a kind of brush to the sponge. I have spoken of the surrender to their extraordinary childish grace as a thing I could actively promote in myself. It may be imagined, if I neglected now to apply as this source for whatever balm it would yield. Stranger than I can express, certainly, with the effort that could struggle against my new lights. It would doubtless have been a greater attention still, however, had it not been so frequently successful. I used to wonder how my little charges could help guessing that I thought strange things about them, and the circumstances of these things only made them even more interesting, but not by itself direct aid to keeping them in the dark. I trembled lest they should see that they were so immensely more interesting. Put things at the worst, at all events, as in meditation, I so often did. Any cloud in their innocence could only be, blameless and freedom and foredoomed as they were, a reason the more for taking risks. There was moments when I knew myself to catch them up by an irresistible impulse and press them with my arm. As soon as I had done so, I used to wonder, what will they think of that? Doesn't it betray too much? It would have been easy to get into a sad wild triangle about how much I might betray. The real account, I feel, of the hours of peace I would still enjoy, with the immediate charm of my companions, was a beguilement still effective even under the shadow of the possibility that it was studied. For if it occurred to me that I might occasionally excite a suspicion by the little outbreak of my sharper passion for them, so too I remember asking if I mightn't see a queerness in the traceable increase of their own demonstrations. It was at this period extravagantly and preternaturally fond of me, which after all I could reflect was no more than a graceful response in children perpetually bowed down over and over. The homage of which they were so lavish succeeded in truth for my nerves quite as well as if I never appeared to myself, as I may say, literally to catch them at purpose in it. They had never, I think, wanted to do so many things with their poor protectress, I mean. That they got their lessons better and better, which were naturally what would please her most, in the way of diverting, entertaining, surprising her, reading her passages, telling her stories, acting her charades, pouncing out at her in disguise as animals and historical characters, and above all astounding her by the pieces they had secretly got by art, could interminably recite. I should never get to the bottom, or I'd let myself go even now, with a prodigious private commentary, all under a still more private correction, with which I, in these days, overscored their full hours. They had shown me from the first a facility for everything, a general faculty which, taking a fresh start, achieved remarkable flights. They got their little tasks as if they loved them, indulged from the mere exuberance of my gifts in the most unimposed little miracles of memory. They not only popped out at me as tigers, as Romans, but as Shakespeareans, astronomers and navigators. This was so singularly the case that it had presumably much to do with the fact, as to which at the present day I am a loss for a different explanation. I allude to my unnatural composure at the subject of another school for miles. What I remember is that I was content for the time not to open the question, and that the contentment must have sprung from the sense of his perpetually striking show of cleverness. You were too clever for a bad governess, for a parson's daughter to spoil, and the strangest if not the brightest thread in his pensive embroidery I just spoke of, with the impression I might have got, if I had dared to work it out, that you were under some influence operating in his small intellectual life as a tremendous incitement. If for reason to reflect, however, that such a boy could postpone school, it was at least as marked that for such a boy to have been kicked out by a schoolmaster were a mystification without end. Let me add that in their company now, I was careful almost never to be out of it. I could follow no scent very far. We lived in a cloud of music and affection, and success and private theatricals. The musical sense in each of the children were the quickest, but the eldest especially had a marvellous knack of catching and repeating. The schoolroom piano broke into all gruesome fancies. When that failed, there were confabulations in corners, the sequels of one of them going out in the eye of spirits in order to come in as something new. I had brothers myself, and it was no revelation to me that little girls could be slavish idolaters of little boys. It surpassed everything that there were a little boy in the world who could have, for the inferior age, sex and intelligence, so fine a consideration. It was extraordinary at one, and to say that they never either quarrelled or complained is to make the note of praise coarse for their quality of sweetness. Sometimes, perhaps indeed, when I dropped into coarseness, I come across traces of little understanding between them, or which one of them should keep me occupied while the other slipped away. There is a naive side, I suppose, in all diplomacy. If my pupils practised upon me, it was surely with the minimum of grossness. Hey Les, no one's got a plaque yet. I put it there just as a sort of option for people. Ooh, I don't really expect anyone to redeem it. Yeah. If their pupils practised upon me, it was surely with the minimum of grossness. We're all in the other quarter that, after a lull, the grossness broke out. I find that I really hang back, but I must take my own plunge. Going on with the record of what was hideous at Blah, I not only challenged the most liberal faith, which I little care about, and this is another matter I renew while I myself suffered, I again pushed the dreadful way through it to the end. There came suddenly an hour after which, as I look back, the business seems to me to have been all pure suffering. I have at least reached the art of it. The straightest road out is doubtless to advance. One evening, with nothing to lead up nor prepare it, I felt the cold touch of impression that had breathed upon me the night of my arrival, and which, much lighter than I have mentioned, I should probably have made little of it in memory, but little of the memory had my subsequent sojourn been less agitated. I had not gone to bed. I sat reading by a couple of candles. Oh, sorry, just occurred to me. I answered your question, but I didn't say hello, Les. Glad to have you. Welcome in. Wow, thank you very kindly. What are they? That being the case, the plaques do take a little while to install, but it'll be ready by tomorrow. Would you like any? Is there any particular name you'd like? Just your normal username? A dedication? Yeah. Let me know what you'd like on it. And thank you very kindly, I should say. Just less you're okay. Do you want it capitalised like that, or do you want it lowercase like it is in your actual name? Cool. Like your actual name, so lowercase, got that. And then, since you're the first, you basically have to pick the place. Where's the main screen? Is there a particular area of the library you'd like to pick out? If you need zoomed in on a particular place, I can point you to what the 6 different sections are. But yeah, generally it would be going on one of the shelves, sort of underlying a particular section. So if there's a particular book you like to be near, or a particular area you're careful, feel free to let me know and I'm happy to do it. Or we could just do the story that we're doing tonight as a memorial of when you did it. But yeah, thank you very kindly, Les. I do appreciate that very greatly. Well, the ghost. So, I guess it's just about where we are actually. Let's move back over there. But so this is our little section of Emery James's, which we got some of his ghost stories. Up above there is the M.R. James's, which are also ghost stories. What else is there? I think that's most of our horror. I got this since we've done some. I don't know what else have we done. Going through all of it. That's pretty much all the direct stuff. I mean, well, I guess also there is the Wicked book, but like I say, I think that's fine. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll put you. Let's head back over there now. Yeah, then I'll put I'll put you just directly above Turn of the Screw and below the M.R. James's. Then, if that works for you. But yeah, thank you very kindly, Les. I do very much appreciate it. Yeah, I'll get that installed for you by tomorrow. Thank you kindly. And yeah, I'm glad you've chosen to make yourself a permanent part of the library. I cannot express in easy terms just how grateful I really am. Thank you very kindly. Okay. Well, that's exciting. Yeah. Yeah, big round of applause for Les, everyone. Thank you very kindly. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. I have to make sure that's a good one. That's the first one. What are we doing? So, yeah. But thank you again very much, Les. I do very much appreciate it. Now where were we? Oh. There is a naive side, I suppose, in all diplomacy. If my pupils practice upon me, it was surely with the minimum of grossness. We're all in other quarters that, after a lull, the grossness broke out. I find that I really hang back, but I must take my right plunge. In going on with the record of what was hideous at Blah, I not only challenged the most liberal faith, which I little care, but, and this is another matter, I renew what I myself suffered. I again pushed my dreadful way through to the end. There comes suddenly an hour after which, as I look back, the business seemed to me to have been all pure suffering. I have at least reached the art of it. The straightest road out is doubtless to advance. One evening, with nothing to lead up or prepare to it, I felt the cold touch of the impression that had breathed on me the night of my arrival, and which, much lighter than as I had mentioned, I should probably have made little of in memory had my subsequent sojourn been less agitated. I had not gone to bed. I sat reading by a couple of candles. There were a room full of old books at Blah, last century fiction some of it, which to the extent of a distinctly depreciated renovation, never to so much as that of a stray specimen, had reached the sequestered home and appealed to the unavowed curiosity of my youth. I remember that the book I had in my hand were Fielding's Amelia, also that I were wholly awake. I recall further both a general conviction that it were horribly late and a particular objection to looking at my watch. I figure finally that the white curtain draping in the fashion of those days, the head of Flora's little bed, and shroud, as I assured myself long before, the perfection of the childish rest. Ooh, the ads is about to come on, but we're not far from the end of this chapter, so let me just snooze them for a second. There we go. Perfection of childish rest. I recollect, in short, that though I were deeply interested in my author, I found myself at the turn of a page and with a spell all scattered, looking straight up from him, and hard at the door of my room. There were moments during which I listened, reminded of the faint sense I had the first night, of there being something undefinably astir in the house, and noted with the soft breath of the open casement just move in the half-drawn blind. Then, with all the marks of deliberation that must have seemed magnificent, had there been anyone to admire it, I laid down my book, rose to my feet, and, taking a candle, went straight out of the room and from the passage, on which my light made little impression, noiselessly closed and locked the door. I can say now neither what determined nor what guided me. I went straight along the lobby, holding my candle hard, till I come within sight of the tall window that presided over the great turn of the staircase. At this point, I precipitously found myself aware of 3 things. It was practically simultaneous, yet they had flashes of succession. My candle, under a bold flourish, went out, and I perceived by the uncovered window what the yielding dusk of earliest morning had rendered it unnecessary. Without it, the next instant I knew that there were a figure on the stair. I speak of sequences, but I required no lapse of seconds to stiffen myself for a third encounter with Quinn. The apparition had reached the landing all halfway up, and were therefore in the spot nearest the window, where at sight of me it stopped short and fixed me exactly as if it fixed me from the tower and from the garden. He knew me as well as I knew him, and so in the cold faint twilight, with a glimmer in the hard glass and another on the polish of the oak stair below, we faced each other in our commotion, or in our common intensity. You were absolutely on this occasion a living, detestable, dangerous presence. But that were not the wonder of wonders. I reserved this distinction for quite another circumstance. The circumstance that dread had unmistakably quitted me. There were nothing in me unable to meet and measure it. I had plenty of anguish after that extraordinary moment, but I had, thank God, no terror, and he knew I hadn't. I found myself at the end of an instant magnificently aware of this. I felt in a fierce rigour of confidence. If I stood my ground a minute, I should cease, for time at least, to have him to reckon with. And during the minute, accordingly, the thing were as human and hideous as a real interview. Hideous just because it were human. As human as to have met alone in the small hours, in the sleeping hours, some enemy, some adventurer, some criminal. With the dread silence of our long gaze at such close quarters, it gave the whole aura, huge as it was, its only note of the unnatural. If I had met a murderer in such a place, at such an hour, we still at least would have spoken. Something would have passed in life between us. If nothing passed, one of us would have moved. The moment was so prolonged that it would have taken but little more to make me doubt if even I were alive. I can't express what followed it, save by saying that the silence itself, which were indeed in a manner an attestation of my strength, became the element into which I saw the figure disappear, in which I definitely saw it turn, as I might have seen the low wretch to which it had once belonged turn in receipt of an order, and pass with my eyes on the villainous back, no one could have more disfigured, straight down the staircase, and into the darkness in which the next bend were lost. That's the end of chapter 9. And we're about, I think, to have the ads come back on. Just shy of a moment, so I won't start the next chapter, but yeah. And again, this chapter doesn't have a lot of actual action in it. Like, this story isn't a story that has a whole lot of actual events really taking place. It is just a series of encounters with the ghosts. All that is being done here is to build an attention in the text, sort of increasing knowledge and increasing certainty that something wrong is going on with these children. And yet at the same time, it does still seem to be building. It doesn't need the crescendo to build up to, really, not physically. It's just growing and growing as there's an increasing awareness of something wrong. It's throwing things off just to the right degree that, you know something bad is going to happen. And the children are aware of something, the governess is aware the children are aware of something. There's this underlying and overwhelming sense that something is off. And yet the longer it goes without something happening, the more you're aware that when it does happen, it's going to be bad. You can't really say exactly how. really is a fascinating thing. But yeah, ads is about to come on, so I'll see you folks on the other side. Yeah. Oof. Right. And yeah, given the time is now just about past the hour, I'm actually ready to take a little bit more of what I was taking to steal my jaw, so I'll take that quickly. Or we have a little in-break discussion. What is there to say about this story is more than we could say already. It's odd, I do think it is stranger than most James. The language is distinctly more... I don't know what is up with it. There's something that is kind of escaping me. It's unsettling is what I suppose I'd say. The way it is written throws me off to a degree that I think is deliberate. I think it is written to be, or to flow in a way that is not natural to speech, to give this sense of the uncanny happening. So that you're aware that something wrong is going on. At the same time, it's not enough for you to really put a finger on it. It's really skillfully done if that is happening. And, yeah, I don't know, it's strange. I know for a fact that the Turn of the Screw is sort of one of the big, or it's probably the big one by Henry James. Like, I've heard of it before, I've heard it mentioned and referenced in other places. And yet on the surface of it, it seems much less sort of interesting than his other stories, much less direct, you know? I mean, it's got the ghostly corner is weird enough in the same way. The Real Right Thing has elements of complexity, the friends of their friends. I mean, Joe and Wingrave, all those. There was so much more of them that was tangibly sort of notable. Yet here in this story, there is very little that actually happens. We are more than halfway through at this point, I believe. Just double check for sure. Yeah, at this point we're a little past the halfway mark by my reckoning of it. And yet nothing like tangible has really happened other than there are ghosts occasionally. We're in this place. All the set and all the sort of build-up, all the weird language, it really sets an atmosphere that sort of sets it apart. So for all that, I can see why it is a notable story. It is, perhaps the most notable. It's odd, really. When I was reading Dubliners a while back, I said that I found it frustrating because I knew there was a lot of in it that I was missing. I wasn't really fully getting. That's not how I feel with this story. With this story, I feel that I'm understanding what is there to be got, but that what there is there, the strange things that are happening, are beyond my ability to properly kind of explain or comprehend, right? I'm seeing everything that's there, but I'm not understanding it. Whereas in Dubliners, I was understanding what I saw, but I wasn't seeing everything. And it's throwing me off in an interesting way. Anyway, swallow water and then we'll back into it. Again, thank you very much, Les. Just didn't want to take a moment to say that. Whew, what are we doing then? So, back to it then. Chapter 10. I remained a while at the top of the stairs, with the effect presently of understanding that when my visitor had gone, he had gone. Then I returned to my room. The foremost thing that I saw there by the light of the candle I left burning was that Flora's little bed were empty, and on this I caught my breath with all the terror that 5 minutes before I had been able to resist. I dashed to the place in which I had left her laying, and over which, with a small silk counterpane, and the sheets were disarranged. The white curtains had been deceivingly pulled forward. Then my step, to my unutterable relief, produced an answering sound. I noticed an agitation of the window blind, and the child, ducking down, emerged rosily from the other side of it. She stood there in so much of her candour and so little of her nightgown, with her pink bare feet and the golden glow of her curls. She looked intensely grave, and I had never had such a sense of longing, of losing an advantage acquired, a thrill of which had just been so prodigious as on my consciousness that she addressed me with reproach. "You naughty! Where have you been?" Instead of challenging her own irregularity, I found myself arraigned and explaining. She herself explained, for that matter, with the loveliest, eagerest simplicity. She had known suddenly, as she lay there, that I were out of the room, and had jumped up to see what had become of me. I had dropped, with the joy of her reappearance, back into my chair, feeling then, and then only, a little faint, and she pattered straight over to me, throwing herself upon my knee, giving herself to be held with the flame of the candle full in the wonderful little face that was still flushed with sleep. I remember closing my eyes an instant, yieldingly, consciously as before the excess of something beautiful that shone out of the blue of her own. "You were looking for me out of the window," I said. "You thought I might be walking the grounds." "Well, you know, I thought someone was." She never blanched as she smiled out at me. Ah, how I looked at her now. "Did you see anyone?" No," she returned, almost, with the full privilege of childish inconsequence, resentfully, but with a long sweetness in her little drawl of the negative. At the moment, in the state of my nerves, I absolutely believed she lied, and if I once more closed my eyes, it were before the dazzle of the 3 or 4 possible ways in which I might take this up. One of these for a moment tempted me with such singular force that, to resist it, I must have gripped my little girl with a spasm that wonderfully she submitted to without a cry or sign of fright. Why not break out at her on the spot and have it all over? Give it to her straight in her lovely little lighted face. You see, you know that you do that. You already quite suspect I believe it. Therefore why not frankly confess it to me, so that we may at least live with it together, and learn perhaps in the strangeness of our fate, where we are and what it means." The solicitation dropped, alas, as it come. If I could immediately have succumbed to it, I might have spared myself. Well, you'll see what. Instead of succumbing, I sprang a gun to my feet, looked at her bed and took an helpless middle way. "Why did you pull the curtain over the place to make you think you were still there?" Flora luminously considered, after which, with a little divine smile, "Because I don't like to frighten you." "But if I had by your idea gone out?" She absolutely declined to be puzzled. She turned her eyes to the flame of the candle as if the question were irrelevant, or at any rate as impersonal as Mrs. Marquette or 9 times 9. "Oh, but you know," she quite adequately answered, "that you might come back, dear, and that you have." And after a little, when she had got into bed, I had a long time, by almost sitting on her for the very tension of my hand, to show how I recognised the pertinence of my return. You may imagine the general complexion, for the moment, of my nights. I repeatedly sat up till I didn't know when. I selected moments when my roommates unmistakably slept and, stealing out, took noiseless turns in the passage. I even pushed as far as to where I had last met Quim, but I never met him there again, and I may as well say that once that I on no other occasion saw him in the house. I just missed, on the staircase nevertheless, a different adventurer. Looking down it from the top, I once recognised the presence of a woman, seated on one of the lower steps, with her back presented to me, her body half bowed, and her head in an attitude of woe in her hands. I had been there but an instant, however, when she vanished without looking round at me. I knew, for all that, exactly what dreadful face she had to show, and I wondered whether, instead of being above if I had been below, I should have had the same nerve for going up that I had lately shown to Quim. Well, there continued to be plenty of call for nerve. On the 11th night after my latest encounter with that gentleman, they was all numbered now. I had an alarm that perilously skirted it, and that indeed, from that particular quality of its unexpectedness, proved quite my sharpest shock. It was precisely the first night during this series that, weary with vigils, I had conceived I might again, without laxity, lay myself down at my old hour. I slept immediately and, as I afterwards knew, till about 1 o'clock. But when I woke it was to sit straight up, completely roused, as if an hand had shaken me. I had left the light burning, but it were now out, and I felt an instant certainty that Flora had extinguished it. This brought me to my feet and straight into the darkness to her bed, where I found she had fled. "Okay, well, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, Wild. Oof, I do appreciate you being there." This brought me to my feet and straight into the darkness to her bed, where I found she had left. A glance at the window enlightened me further, and the striking of a match completed the picture. The child had again got up, this time blowing out the taper, and again for some purpose of observation or response, squeezed in behind the blind and were peering into the night. She now saw, as she had not, I satisfied myself the previous time, reproved to me by the fact that she was disturbed neither by my re-illumination nor by the haste I had made in getting into my slippers and into a wrap. Hidden, protected, absorbed, she evidently rested on the sill. The casement opened forward and gave herself up. There were a great still moon to help her. This fact accounted in my quick decision. She was face to face with the apparition we had met in the lake, and I could now communicate with it as she had not then, been able to do. What I, on my side, had to care for, without disturbing her, to reach from the corridor some other window, turned to the same corner. I got to the door without her hearing me. I got out of it, closed it, and listened from the other side, with some sound from her. While I stood in the passage, I had my eyes on her brother's door, which were but 10 steps off, and which, indescribably, produced in me a renewal of the strange impulse that I had lately spoken of as my temptation. What if I should go straight in and march to his window? What if, by risking to his boyish bewilderment a revelation of my motive, I should throw across the rest of the mystery the long altar of my boldness? This thought held me sufficiently to make me cross to his threshold and pause again. I preternaturally listened. I figured to myself what might portentously be. I wondered if his bed were also empty, and he also secretly at watch. It were a deep sound this minute at the end, to which my impulse failed. He were quiet. He might be innocent. The risk were hidden. It were hideous. I turned away. There were a figure in the grounds. A figure prowling for a sight. A visitor with whom Flora were engaged. But it weren't the visitor most concerned with my boy. I hesitated afresh. On other grounds, only a few seconds, then I had made my choice. There were empty rooms enough at Bly, and it were only a question of choosing the right one. The right one suddenly presented it to me as the lower one. Though high above, the gardens, in the solid corner of the house that I have spoken of as the old tower, there were a large square chamber, arranged with some state as a bedroom, the extravagant size of which made it so inconvenient that it had not for years, though kept by Miss Gross's exemplary order, been occupied. I had often admired it, and I knew my way about in it. I had only, after just faltering at the first chill of gloom in its disuse, pass across it and unbolt, in all quietness, one of the shutters. Achieving the transit, I uncovered the glass without a sound, and, applying my face to the pane, were able, the darkness without being much less than within, to see that I commanded the right direction. Then I saw something more. The moon made the night extraordinarily penetrable, and showed me on the lawn a person, diminished by distance, who stood there motionless and, as if fascinated, looking up to where I had appeared, looking, that is, not so much straight at me, as at something that were apparently above me. There was clearly another person above me. There were a person on the tower. The presence on the lawn was not the least what I had conceived, and confidently hurried to me. The presence on the lawn, I felt sick as I made it out. The poor little Miles himself. That's the end of chapter 10. I have a swallow of water. These kids are not alright. Again, it's a sort of strange thing. There's not anything too explicitly horrifying going on. It's just the contact these children have with the ghosts that makes the horror, isn't it? I suppose the protective impulse that most people have for children sort of grants it. Even if you don't like kids, you generally are of the opinion they need to be protected. It's natural. I mean, I guess that was the whole point of the thing, right? The introduction, the reason it's called the turn of the screw, is that a child in a bad situation is a turn of a screw towards or against you. Making good use of it, though. Anyhow, pressing on. Chapter 11. It was not till late the next day that I spoke to Mrs. Gross, who the rigour with which I kept my pupils in sight, making it often difficult to meet her privately. The more as we each felt the importance of not provoking on the part of the servants quite as much as on the children, any suspicion of a secret flurry or of a discussion of mysteries. I drew great security in this particular from her mere smooth aspect. There was nothing in her fresh face to pass on to others the least of my horrible confidences. She believed me, I was sure, absolutely. If she hadn't, I don't know what she would have become of me, or what would have become of me, or I couldn't have borne the strain alone. She were a magnificent monument, the blessings of a want of imagination. And if she could see in our little charges nothing but the beauty and amiability, their happiness and cleverness, she had no direct communication with the sources of my trouble. If they had been at all visible, blighted or battered, she would doubtless have grown on tracing it back, haggard and grown on tracing it back, haggard enough to march them as matters stood. However, I could feel her when she surveyed them with her large white arms folded in the habit of serenity, and all her look, thank the Lord's mercy that if they were ruined, the pieces would still serve. That was a fucking meandering sentence and a half, Jesus. Flights of fancy gave place in her mind to a steady fireside glow. I had already begun to perceive how, with the development of the conviction that, as time went on without public accident, our young things could, after all, look out for themselves, she addressed her greatest solicitude to the sad case presented by the deputy guardian, that for myself were a sound simplification. I could engage that to the world my face should tell no tales, but it would have been, in the conditions, an immense added worry to find myself anxious about hers. The hour I now speak of, she had joined me under pressure on the terrace, where, with the lapse of the season, the afternoon sun were now agreeable. We sat there together, while before us, and at a distance, yet within call if we wished, the children strolled to and fro in one of their most manageable moods. They moved slowly, in unison below us, over the lawn, the boy, as they went, reading aloud from a storybook, passing his arm round his sister to keep her quite in touch. Mrs. Growers watched them with a positive placidity. Then I caught the suppressed intellectual creep with which she consciously turned to me, take from me a view of the back of the tapestry. I had made her a receptacle of lurid things, but there were an odd recognition of my superiority, my accomplishments and my function, in her patience under my pain. She offered her mind to my disclosures as, had I wished to mix a witch's broth and proposed it with assurance, she would have held out a large, clean saucepan. This had become thoroughly her attitude by the time that, in my recital of the events of the night, I reached the point of what Mild had said to me when, after seeing him at such a monstrous hour, almost on the very spot when he happened now to be, I had gone down to bring him in, choosing then in the window with a concentrated need of alarming the house, rather than that method than any noisier process. I had left them meanwhile in little doubt of my small hope of representing with success, even to her, actual sympathy, my sense of the real splendour of the little inspiration with which, after I had got him into the house, the boy met my final articulate challenge. As soon as I appeared in the moonlight on the terrace, he had come to me as straight as possible, on which I had taken his hand without a word and led him through the dark spaces up the staircase where Quint had so hungrily offered for him, along the lobby where I had listened and trembled, and so to his forsaken room. Not a sound on the way had passed between us. I had wondered, oh how I had wondered, if he were groping about in his dreadful little mind for something plausible and not too grotesque. It would tax his invention certainly, and I felt this time over his real embarrassment a curious full of triumph. If he were a sharp trap for any game hitherto successful, he could play no longer a perfect propriety, nor could he pretend to it. So how the deuce would he get out of the scrape? There beating me indeed with a passionate throb at this question, an equal dumb appeal as to how the deuce I should. I was confronted at last, as never yet, with all the risk attached even now to sound of my own horrid note. I remember, in fact, as we pushed into his little chamber, where the bed had not been slept in at all, and the window, uncovered to the moonlight, made the place so clear that there is no need of striking a match. I remember how suddenly dropped, sank up on the edge of his bed, from the force of the idea that he might know how he really, as they say, had me. He could do what he liked, with all his cleverness to help him, so long as I should continue to defer the old tradition of the criminality of those caretakers of the young, who minister to superstitions and fears. He had me indeed, and the cleft stick, who would ever absolve me, who would consent that I should be unarmed, if, by the faintest rumour of an overture, I were the first to introduce into our perfect intercourse an element so dire. No, no. It were useless to attempt to convey to Mrs. Gross, just as it is scarcely less so to attempt to suggest here, how, during our short, stiff brush there in the dark, he fairly shook me with admiration. I were, of course, thoroughly kind and merciful. Never, never yet had I placed on his small shoulders hands of such tenderness as those with which, while I rested against the bed, I held him there, well under fire. I had no alternative but, in form at least, to put it to him. You must tell me now, and all the truth. What did you go out for? What were you doing there? I can still see his wonderful smile, the whites of his beautiful eyes, and the uncovering of his clear teeth shine at me in the dark. If I tell you, will you understand? My heart at this leaped into my mouth. Would he tell me why? I found no sound on my lips to press it, and I were aware of answering only with a vague, repeated grimace and nod. He was gentleness itself. While I wagged my head at him, he stood there, more than ever a little fairy prince. It was brightness indeed that gave me respite. Would it be so great if he were really going to tell me? Well, he said at last, just exactly in order that you should do this. Do what? Think me, for a change, bad. I shall never forget the sweetness and gaiety with which he brought out the words, nor how, on top of it, he bent forward and kissed me. It was practically the end of everything. I met his kiss, and I had to make, while I folded him for a minute in my arms, the most stupendous effort not to cry. He'd given exactly the account of himself that permitted at least my going behind him. They were only with the effect of confirming my acceptance of it that, as I presently glanced about the room, I could say, "And you didn't undress at all?" He fairly glittered in the groom. "Not at all. I sat up and read." "And when did you go down?" "At midnight. When I'm bad, I am bad." I see. It's charming. But how could you be sure I should know it?" "Oh, I arranged that with Flora." His answer rang out with a readiness. "She was to get up and look out." "Which is what she did do. It was I who fell into the trap. So she disturbed you, and to see what she was looking at, you also looked. You saw." "While you," I concurred, "caught your death in the night air." He literally bloomed so from this exploit that he could afford to radiantly do assent. "How otherwise should I have been bad enough?" he asked. Then, after another embrace, this incident and our interview closed on my recognition of all the reserves of goodness that, for his joke, he had been able to draw upon. That's the end of chapter 11. She's very bad at this, I think. I mean, like, I've talked sometimes about how I really admire in M.R. James's stories, and in most of these so far, the Emery Jameses, the way in which people have a real sort of sense of, resolving things effectively and being direct and doing things that are realistic. I don't think it's unrealistic the way in which she's handling this, but she's certainly doing a very poor job of it. I think the way in which she's, how'd you put it? Sort of pussyfooting around this, sort of letting him sort of make these claims and sort of make these excuses and feeling she can no longer, how'd you say? She can no longer sort of ask him the question after he's made this excuse. Keep her from asking them directly, which is what's, of all things, is really sort of damaging her ability to interact with us at all. It's a poor handle of the situation, I think. Anyhow, we'll press on a little longer. Yeah, I'm feeling up to a little more, so. Chapter 12. The particular impression I had received proved in the morning light, I repeat, not quite successfully presentable to Mrs. Gross. Or I reinforced it with a mention of still another remark that he had made before we separated. "It all lies in half a dozen words," I said to her. "Words that really settle the matter. Think you know what I might do?" He threw that off to show me how good he is. He knows down to the ground what he might do. That's what he gave them a taste of at school. "Lord, you do change," cried my friend. "I don't change. I simply make it out. The four, depend upon it, perpetually meet. If on either end of these last nights you had been with either child, you'd clearly have understood. The more I've watched and watched, the more I've felt that if there were nothing else to make it sure, it would be made so by the systematic silence of each. Never by a slip of the tongue have they so much as alluded to either of their old friends, any more than Miles has alluded to his expulsion. Oh yes, we may sit here and look at them, and they may show off to us there to their fill. But even while they pretend to be lost in their fairy tale, they're steeped in their vision of the dead restored to them. He's not reading to her, I declare. They're talking of them. They're talking horrors. I go on, I know, as if I were crazy. It's a wonder I'm not. What I've seen would have made you so. It has only made me more lucid, made me get hold of still other things. My lucidity must have seemed awful, but the charming creatures who was victims of it, passing and repassing in their interchecked sweetness, gave my colleague something to hold on to, and I felt how tight she held, as, without stirring upon the breath of my passions, she covered them with her arm. What other things have you got hold? I have the very things that delighted, fascinated, and yet, at bottom now, I so strangely see mystified and troubled me. They're more than earthly beauty. They're absolutely unnatural goodness. It's a game, I went on. It's a policy, a fraud, on the part of the little darlings. As yet mere lovely babies. Yes, mad as that seems. The very act of bringing it out really helped me to trace it, follow it up all and piece it all together. They haven't been good, they've only been absent. It's been easy to live with them because they're so simply leading a life of their own. They're not mine, they're not ours. They're his and they're hers. Quince and that woman's. Quince and that woman's. They want to get them. Oh, how at this poor Mrs. Gross appeared to study them. But for what? The love of all the evil in those dreadful days that they have put into them, and to ply them with the evil still. Keep up their work of demons is what brings the others back. Lars, said my friend under her breath. The explanation were only to reveal the real acceptance of my further proof of what, in the bad time, if there had been a worse even than this, must have occurred. There could have been no such justification for me as the plain assent of their experience to whatever depths of depravity I found credible in our brace of scoundrels. It were an obvious submission and memory that she brought out after a moment. They were her askings. But what can they do now? She pursued. Do, I echoed, so loud that Miles and Flora, as they passed at their distance, paused an instant in their walk and looked at us. Don't they do enough? I demanded in a lower tone, while children, having smiled and nodded and kissed hands to us, resumed their exhibition. We was held by it a minute, then I answered, they can destroy them. At least my companion did turn, but the appeals she launched were a silent one, the effect of which would have made me more explicit. They don't know yet quite how, but they're trying hard. They see only across, as it were, and beyond, in strange places and in high places, the top of towers, the roofs of houses, the outside of windows, the farther edge of pools. There's a deep design on either side to shorten the distance and overcome the obstacle, so the success of the tempters is only a question of time. They've only to keep their suggestion of danger, for the children to come and perish in the attempt. Mrs. Gross slyly got up, and I scrupulously added, unless, of course, we can prevent. Standing there before me, while I kept my seat, she visibly turned things over. Their uncle must do the preventing. He must take them away. And who's to make him? She'd been scanning the distance, but she now dropped on me a foolish face. You, miss? By writing him that his house is poisoned and his nephew and niece mad? But if they are, miss? And if I am myself, you mean? That's a charming news to be sent to him by a person enjoying his confidence, and his prime undertaking was to give him no worry. Mrs. Gross considered following the children again. Yes, he do hate worry. That with a great reason. Why those fiends took him in so long. No doubt, though his indifference must have been awful. I'm not a fiend at any rate. I shouldn't take him in. My companion, after an instant, for all answer, sat down again and grasped my arm. Make him at any rate come to you, I started. To me? And sudden fear of what she might do. Him? He ought to be here. He ought to help. I quickly rose, and I think I must have shown her a queerer face than ever. You see me asking him for a visit? No, with her eyes on my face, she evidently couldn't. Instead of it even, as a woman reads another, she could see what I myself saw. His derision, his amusement, his contempt for the breakdown of my resignation at being left alone, for the farm machinery I had set in motion to attract his attention, my slighted charms. She didn't know, no one knew, how proud I had been to serve him, and stick to our terms, yet she nonetheless took the measure, I think, of the warning I now gave her. But you should so lose your head as to appeal to him for me. She was really frightened. Me, miss. I would leave on the spot, both him and you. That's the end of chapter 12. And technically at this point we have reached the point where I think I'll be comfortable finishing another scene, but my jury's starting to ease up a bit, so I might press on a little longer. Yeah. What is there to say on this then, overall? Well, there's a few things. Firstly, I've lost quite a lot of respect for our narrator here. Obviously, she's got her pride. And she doesn't want to embarrass herself and lose out on all this and all that. But it's an understandable motive. But I think it is quite a distasteful one, really. Like, she's generally in concern for these children, as you can tell, and she's becoming obsessed with it and a little, frantic about it. But she's not willing to make the inquiry. She's not willing to risk. I mean, it's not even that she's risking losing the job at that point. She says that if Mrs. Gross asks about it, she'll leave. So the job isn't what's keeping her. It is some sense of, obviously pride, but also I wonder if maybe, again, I think there was some sort of suggestion of an attraction to the fellow's nephew and niece she's looking after. I don't know. It's an odd motive. Again, I don't think as the sort of narrator of this story, as the sort of protagonist of it, I think she is one of the less sensible ghost story people we see. I'd normally be annoyed about it, but being so in her head, we can sort of see her falling to bits about it, sort of losing her sense of proportion as we go on. It's more understandable than it would be in some of the shorter and sort of lighter fictions we've read. But yeah. I think it's building up a bit. Anyway, I'll swallow a water and we'll press on for at least a couple more chapters, I think. Anyhow. Chapter 13. You're all very well to join them, but speaking of them proved quite as much as ever an effort beyond my strength. Offered in close quarters, difficulties as insurmountable as before. The situation continued a month, with the new aggregations and peculiar notes, the notes above all sharper and sharper, with a small ironic consciousness on the part of my pupils. It were not, I am sure, today, as I was sure then, my mere infernal imagination. It were absolutely traceable that they were aware of my predicament, that this strange relation made, in a manner, for a long time, the air in which we moved. I don't mean that they had their tongues in their cheeks, or did anything vulgar. That were not one of the dangers. I do mean, on the other hand, that the element of the unnamed and untouched become, between us, greater than any other, and that so much avoidance couldn't have been made successful without a great deal of tacit arrangement. It were as if, at moments, we were potentially coming into sight of subjects before, before which we must stop short, turning suddenly out of alleys that we perceived to be blind, closing with a little bang that made us look at each other, but like all bangs it was something louder than we had intended. The door we had indiscreetly opened. All roads lead to Rome, and there were times when it might have struck us that almost every branch of study or subject of conversation skirted forbidden ground. The beginning down with a question of the return of the dead in general, and whatever especially might survive from memory, the friends and little children had lost. There were days when I could have sworn that one of them had, with a small invisible nudge, said to the other, "She thinks she'll do it this time, but she won't." To do it would have been to indulge, for instance, and for once in a way, in some direct reference to the lady who had prepared them for my discipline. They had delightful, endless appetite for passage in my own history, to which I had again and again treated them. I was in possession of everything that had ever happened to me, had, with every circumstance, the story of my smallest adventures, and of those of my brothers and sisters, and of the cat and the dog alone, as well as many particulars of the whimsical bent of my father, the furniture and arrangement of what our house, and the conversation of the old women of our village. There was things enough, taken one with the other, to chatter about if one went very fast, and knew by instinct when to go round. They pulled with an art of their own the strings of my invention and memory, and nothing else perhaps, when I thought of such occasion afterwards, gave me so the suspicion of being watched from under cover. It were in any case over my life, my past, and my friends alone that we could take anything like our ease. A state of affairs led them, sometimes without the least pertinence, to break out into sociable reminders. I were invited, with no visible connection, to repeat a fresh Goody Goslin celebrated more, or confirm the details already supplied as to the cleverness of the vicarage pony. It were partly at such junctures as these, and partly at quite different ones, that, with the turn my matters had now taken, my predicaments, as I have called it, grew more sensible. The fact that the days passed for me without another encounter or it would have appeared to have done by something towards soothing my nerves. Since the light brush, that second night on the upper landing in the presence of a woman at the foot of the stair, I had seen nothing, whether in or out of the house, that one had better not have seen. There were many a corner round which I expected to come upon Quinn, and many a situation that, in a merely sinister way, would have favoured the appearance of Miss Jessup. The summer had turned, the summer had gone. The autumn had dropped upon Bly and had blown out half our lights. The place, with its grey sky and withered garlands, its bared spaces and scattered dead leaves, were like a theatre after the performance, all strewn with crumpled playbills. There were exactly states of the air, conditions of sound and of stillness, unspeakable impressions of the kind administering moment, that brought back to me, long enough to catch it, the feeling of the medium in which, in that June evening out of doors, I had first sight of Quim, and in which, too, at those other instants, I had, after seeing him through the window, looked for him in vain in the circle of shrubbery. I recognised the sign, the portents, I recognised the moment, the spot, but they remained unaccompanied and empty, and I continued unmolested, if unmolested one could call a young woman whose sensibility had, in the most extraordinary fashion, not declined but deepened. I had said in my talk with Miss Gross that on the horrid scene of Flores by the lake, and had perplexed her by so saying it, that it would for the moment distress me much more to lose my power than to keep it. I had then expressed what was visually in my mind, the truth that, whether the children really saw or not, since that is it were not definitely proved, I greatly preferred as a safeguard the fullness of my own exposure. I was ready to know that the very worst that were to be known. What I had then had an ugly glimpse of, that my eyes might be sealed, just while theirs was most opened. Well, my eyes was sealed, it appeared at present, a consummation for which it seemed blasphemous not to thank God. There were, alas, a difficulty about that. I would have thanked him with all my soul had I not held in a proportionate measure, the conviction of the secret of my pupils. How can I retrace today the strange steps of my obsession? There were times of our being together when I would have been ready to swear that literally in my presence, but with my direct sense of it closed, they had visitors who were known and welcome. Then it were that, had I not been deterred by the very chance that such an injury might prove greater than the injury to be averted, my exultation would have broken out. They're here, you little wretches, I would have cried, and you can't deny it now. The little wretches denied it with all the added volume of their sociability and their tenderness, just in the crystal depth of which, like the flash of fish in the stream, the mockery of their advantage peeped up. The shock had in truth sunk into me still deeper than I knew on this night when, looking out either for Quint or Miss Jessel under the stars, I had seen there the boy over his rest I watched, and who had immediately brought in with him, and straightway there turned on me the lovely upward look with which, from the battlements above us, the hideous apparition of Quint had played. If it were a question of scare, my discovery on this occasion had scared me more than any other, and it were essentially in the scared state that I drew my actual conclusions. It harassed me so that sometimes, at odd moments, I shut myself up audibly to rehearse. It were at once a fantastic relief and a renewed despair, the manner in which I might come to the point. I approached it from one side, and the other, while in my room, I flung myself about, but I always broke down in the monstrous utterances of names. As they died away on my lips, I said to myself that I should indeed open to represent something infamous, if by pronouncing them I should violate as rare a little case of instinctive delicacy as any schoolroom probably ever had known. When I said to myself, they have the manners to be silent, and you, trusted as you are, the baseness to speak, I felt myself crimson, and I covered my face, going on volubly enough, till one of our prodigious palpable blushes occurred. I can call them nothing else. The strange dizzy lift or swim, I try for terms, the stillness, a pause of all life that had nothing to do with the more or less noise we were at the moment might be engaged in making, and I could hear through any intensified mirth or quickened recitation or louder strum of the piano. Then it were that the others, the outsiders, was there. Though they were not angels, they passed, as the French say, causing me, while they stayed, to tremble with the fear of their addressing to their younger victims yet some more infernal message, or more vivid image than they had thought good enough for myself. Well, it were least possible to get rid of with a cruel idea that whatever I had seen, Miles and Flora saw more, things terrible and unguessable, that sprang from dreadful passages of intercourse in the past. Such things naturally left on the surface, for the time, a chill that we vociferously denied we felt. We had all three, with repetition, got into such splendid training that we went each time to mark the close of the incident, almost automatically through the very same movements. It was striking of the children, at all events, to kiss me inveterately with wild irrelevance, and never to fail. One or the other are the precious questions that had helped us through the many a peril. Hey Raymond, how you doing? You're coming in a little bit late to the turn of the screw. We're over halfway through right now. But just to give you the general sense, we're following the story of a governess to a sort of lord who lives in the city of London, who has been appointed to look after his children in the countryside. Yeah. I think the VODs are still up on this has been in two parts. The first VOD is still, I think, on Twitch. If not, it'll be on the YouTube. But if you want to catch up, you can go through. But I'll give you a quick summary, just so you can follow along if you want to stick around. Yeah, so we're following the story of. First, it's framed as being told by another person at a party. It's being quite a grim story. We follow the story of a governess who's hired by a lord who lives in the city of London to look after his niece and nephew who are orphaned and are in his care in their country home in Bly. These children are sort of impossibly lovely and like kind and polite and all these things. But almost immediately she receives a letter that informs her that the young lad, who's about 8 years old, has been expelled from his school, and she starts to encounter ghosts, specifically the ghost of Quint, who is which was a man who worked for the Lord and who was briefly master of the house and who looked after the children, and then Miss Jessel, who is the former governess, both of whom have since died. And as time has gone on, she's seen these ghosts more and more and discovered they're interested in the children, and has come to suspect that the children are aware of them to a degree that she's not. Yeah. And to that end is slowly becoming more and more obsessed with the idea that the children are being followed and pursued by these ghosts, with the intent of these ghosts to have involvement in them in some way. Though it's increasingly sort of clear from the text that she's going a little bit mad with it, at least by my personal understanding. Yeah, and at this point we have just had a point where the little boy has snuck out of his room around about midnight to go and meet with one of them, and they've continued to tell really compelling stories that she feels she can't address as to why they're acting the way they're acting and why they're doing what they're doing. At this point they have ended into a sort of, how'd you put it? Like an understanding with each other, where none of them are talking about it, but they know that she knows and she knows that they know, sort of thing. And yeah, that's where we're at the minute. So if you want to stick around and give it a go from there, that's where we're at. If you want to come back another day and try another story, I try and stream just about every day. And if you... That's fair. Well, we are at about the 3/4 away point. We're just part way through chapter 13. But yeah, if you want to stick around and try and follow along, you're very welcome to. If you want to try another day, I quite understand. But yeah, very happy to have you in. Yeah, that's where we're at anyhow. With that, I shall get back to it, shall we? It was striking the children, at all events, to kiss me inveterately, with riled irrelevancies, and never to fail, one or the other, the precious questions that had helped us through many a peril. When do you think he will come? Don't you think we ought to write? There was nothing like that inquiry, we found by experience, for carrying off an awkwardness. He, of course, with her uncle in Harley Street. And we lived in much profusion of theory that he might at any moment arrive to mingle in our circle. It were impossible to have given less encouragement than he had administered to such a doctrine. If we had not had that doctrine to fall back upon, we should have deprived each other of some of our finest exhibitions. He never wrote to them. That may have been selfish, but it were part of the flattery of his trust with myself. For the way in which the man pays his highest tributes to a woman is apt to be put by the mere festal celebrations of one of the sacred laws of his comfort. So I held that I carried out of the spirit of the pledge given to not appeal to him when I let our young friends understand that their own letters were but charming literary exercises. They was too beautiful to be posted. I kept them myself. I have them all to this hour. This was a rule indeed, which only added to the satiric effect of my being piled with supposition that he might at any moment be among us. It was exactly as if our young friends knew how almost more awkward than anything else that might be for me. It appeared to me, moreover, as I looked back, no note in all this more extraordinary than the mere fact that, in spite of my tensions and of their triumph, I never lost patience with them. Adorable they must in truth have been, I now feel, since I didn't in these days hate them. With exasperation, however, if relief had longer been postponed, finally have betrayed me. In little matters, relief arrived. I call it relief, but we're only the relief that a snap brings to a strain, or the burst of a thunderstorm with a day of suffocation. It released change, and it come with a rush. That's the end of chapter 13. Again, this chapter is mostly just talking about the maintenance of the status quo of these things, of the sort of understand they have between them. But I do feel more and more as we go on that the prose is sort of showing that she is losing her mind as these children sort of develop like this. She is clearly not in a good state. I mean, she wasn't in the first place. The fact that she won't contact her father just because she's got this sense of pride about her is not a thing a sensible person does. She's not holding on well in this whole affair, I think. Yeah. Anyway, I'll have a quick swallow of water and we'll press right on. Chapter 14. Walking to church a certain Sunday morning, I had little Miles at my side, and his sister, in advance of us, and Mrs. Gross's, well in sight. It were a crisp, clear day, the first of its order for some time, and night had brought a touch of frost, and the autumn air, bright and sharp, made the church bells almost gay. It were not accident or thought that I should have happened at such a moment to be particularly and very gratefully struck with the obeisance of my little charges. Why did they never exempt my inexorable our perpetual society. Something or other had brought nearer home to me that I had all but pinned the boy to my shawl. In the way our companions were marshalled before me, I might have appeared to provide against some danger or rebellion, or like a jailer with an eye to the possible surprises and escapes. All this belonged, I mean their magnificent little surrender, just to the special array of the facts that were most abysmal. Turned back for Sunday by his uncle's tailor, who had a free hand and a notion of pretty waistcoats and of his grand little air, Miles's old title of independence, the right of his sex and situation, was so stamped upon him, that if he had suddenly struck for freedom I should have had nothing to say. I was, with the strangest of chances, wondering how I should meet with him when the revolution unmistakably occurred. I call it a revolution because I now see, with the word he spoke, the curtain rose on the last act of my dreadful drama. The catastrophe was precipitated. "Look here, my dear, you know," he charmingly said. "When in the world, please, I am going back to school?" Transcribed here, the speech sounds harmless enough, particularly as uttered in the sweet casual part, which, at all interlocutors, but above all his eternal governors, threw off intonations as if he were tossing roses. There was something in them that always made one catch. I caught at any rate now so effectively that I stopped just short, as if one of the trees in the park had fallen across the road. There was something new on the spot between us, and he was perfectly aware I recognised it. Though it enabled me to do so, he had no need to look a whit less candid and charming than usual. I could feel him in how he already, from my first finding nothing to reply, perceived the advantage he had gained. I was so slow to find anything that he had plenty of time, after a minute, to continue with his suggestive but inconclusive smile. "You know, my dear, for a fellow to be with a lady always," his "my dear" were constantly upon his lips for me, and nothing could have expressed more the exact shade of the sentiment with which I desired to inspire my pupils than its fond familiarity. It was so respectfully easy, but I felt that at present I must pick my own phrases. I remember that, to gain time, I tried to laugh, and I seemed to see in the beautiful face with which he watched me how ugly and queer I looked. And always with the same lady," I returned. He neither blanched nor winked. The old thing were virtually out between us. "Of course, she's jolly perfect lady. But after all, I'm a fellow, don't you see, who's, well, getting on." I lingered there with him an instant, ever so kindly. "Yes, you're getting on." Oh, but I felt hopeless. I've kept to this day the heartbreaking little idea of how he seemed to know that, and to play with it. "You can't say I've not been awfully good, can you?" I laid my hands on his shoulder, although I felt much better it would be to walk on. I was not yet quite able. "No, I can't say that, Miles. Except just that one night, you know. That one night." I couldn't look as straight as he. "Why, when I went out of the house." "Yes. Oh, yes. But I forget what you did it for." "You forget?" He spoke with the sweet extravagance of a childish reproach. "Why, it was just to show you I could." "Oh, yes, you could. And I can again." I felt I might perhaps after all succeed in keeping my wits about me. "Certainly. But you won't." "No, not that again. It was nothing." "It was nothing," I said. "We must go on." He resumed our walk with me, passing his hand into my arm. "And when am I going back?" I wore, in turning it over, my most responsible air. "Were you very happy at school?" He just considered. "Oh, I'm happy enough anywhere." "Well then," I quavered, "if you're just as happy here." "Ah, but that isn't everything. Of course you know a lot." "But do you think that you know almost as much?" I asked. He paused. "Not half that I want to," Miles honestly professed. "But it isn't so much that." "What is it then?" "Well, I want to see more of life." I see. We had arrived within sight of the church. The various persons, including several of the household supply, on their way to it, clustered about the doors to see us go in. I quickened our step. I wanted to get there before the questions between us opened up much further. I reflected hungrily that he would have for more than an hour to be silent. I thought with envy of the comparative dusk of the pew, and the almost spiritual help of the assoc on which I might bend my knees. I seemed literally to be running a race with some confusion to which you were about to reduce me. But I thought you had got in first when, before we had entered the churchyard, he threw out, "I want my own sword." It literally made me bow forward. "There aren't many of your own sort, Miles," I laughed, "unless perhaps the little Flora. You really compare me to a baby girl." His family singularly winked. "Don't you then love our sweet Flora?" "If I didn't, and you too, if I didn't," he repeated, as if retreating from a jump. He leaving his thoughts so unfinished that after we had come into the gate, another stop, which he imposed on me by the pressure of his arm, become inevitable. Mrs. Gross and Flora had passed into the church. The other worshippers had followed, and we were passed for the minute, alone among the old thick graves. He had paused on the path from the gate, by low oblong table-like tombs. "Yes, if you didn't." He looked while I waited about the graves. "Well, you know what?" But he didn't move. He presently produced something that made me drop straight down on the stone slab, as if suddenly to rest. "Does my uncle think what you think?" I markedly rested. "How do you know what I think?" Well, of course I don't, for it strikes me you never tell me. But I mean, does he know?" "Know what, Miles? But why the way I'm going on?" I recognised quickly enough that I could make to this inquiry no answer that wouldn't involve something of a sacrifice with my employer. It struck me that we were all at Blah, sufficiently sacrificed to make that venial. "I don't think your uncle much cares." Miles on this stood looking at me. "And don't you think he can be made to?" "In what way?" "Why, by his coming down." "And who'll get him to come down?" "I will," the boy said, with extraordinary brightness and emphasis. He gave me another look charged with that expression, then marched off alone into the church. That's the end of chapter 14. Now we're coming up with the ad break, so let's do a little bit of thinking on that chapter rather than pressing right on ahead. So, it's to be said pretty clearly here that she's very bad at being controlled by these children. Like, for all that they're bright and polite and charming and all this, they are still children. But at the same time, it is strange the way he talks. I mean, calling her my dear is a distinctly sort of weird thing for a child of 8 years old to be doing to an adult teacher. Again, probably a lot of that is, historical vernacular and changing, ideas of what is proper speech and address. It does still strike me as quite odd the way in which he is so formal and particular in addressing her. He's also very composed and seems, as described at least, as very sure of himself. Instead, it does make you wonder whether he's getting something from this sort of ghostly visitation, and more than just the sort of sights of these people. It was said that even before they died, he was quite close with Quinn. He was said to be quite a bad man. I don't know. Maybe he's just trained in the tricks of Lotharia. Although again, that seems weird for an 8-year-old to be able to do. How bright or how charming. Still, the often does give on some wonder. It's also notable that them going to church doesn't really seem to change anything about the Edda. Like, the church is, she mentioned regaining some faith in this, but church here is not held as sort of a sacred thing. The nature of God does not seem to intervene in this miracles. Or at least maybe it would have, I don't know, but she definitely doesn't approach the priest without telling, so it makes you wonder. But yeah. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, again, we see progress towards the sort of inevitable conflict over expulsion, and the fact that, obviously by ignoring it, she's just put off a problem for later that is inevitably going to rear its head again. Yeah. And of course the question of the uncle, who just distinctly does not care, who was very explicit about not being bothered with anything by them. Which, I guess also explains sort of the way in which these children are able so easily to be pushed in the hands of, even when they're alive, sort of negative adult figures. and even past the veil of death into them, you know? Neglect is what's done it for them more than anything. Left them strange and alone, and sort of without anyone else to turn to. And our own governess, the sort of narrator of the story, comes in a bit too late, really, for it to be much good for them. Anyway, the ads is about to start, so I'll see you on the other side, those of you who fall into the ads at least. I shall start with my customary drink of water. Now then. Whew. Yeah, what else is there to say about this book overall? Again, it is a sort of weird one. This is one of those books that is sort of, yeah, I don't know. It's sort of putting me into a headspace of strangeness, I guess. I mean, the flow of the text is distinctly meant to be, I think it's meant to be disorienting. I certainly feel disoriented by it. I mean, it can be hard to say because I'm not exactly the most stable of individuals at the best of times, but some stories you sort of dive into and they sort of lead you a certain way, and this one seems like it's leading me about quite a bit. I just can't hold to it really. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with it. Yeah. Yeah, fair play, Abbe. Slads you, your elf. Fair enough to that too, yeah. Alright, we crack our neck first. So you can hear any that come. Ooh, that was a good one. Let me stand and do the back. Never really popped the back, but God, I hope you heard that one from the neck. That was a good loud one, jeez. Oh, I do feel much better for that. Thank you kindly, Abbe. Ooh. But yeah. Yeah, this story it feels like it's leading me sort of a bit all over the place. But yeah, we've got further than I meant to anyway, so I think we'll go maybe one or two more chapters after this and then we'll call it for the evening, but yeah. Should leave us just, yeah. Another chapter or two should leave us just enough for another good singles hit, so that'll be the goal. Yeah. But yeah. I feel like I should have more to say because the ads are still going on, but I don't really like. I don't know. It's quite a tight, well not a tight, but quite a dense book is what I mean. So there's a lot of it packed into a sort of. Although there's not a lot of. There's a lot of words packed into a short story. Is I guess the other way around. And while there's depth to it, I just don't think there's enough of it I can dissect properly to really fill the space here a bit. It's just a little more. Anyway, we're about to end the ad breaks, so getting right back into it. Okay, ads is over. We're going to go one chapter more, maybe two. Yeah, the next one's very short, so we'll do two more chapters, I think, and then we'll call it. So, diving right back into it, though. Chapter 15. The business was practically settled from the moment. I never followed them. They were a pitiful surrender to agitation, but my being aware of this had somehow no power to restore me. I only sat there on my tomb and read into what our young friend had said to me, the fullness of its meaning. By the time I had grasped the old worth of which, I had also embraced, for absence, the pretext that I were ashamed of for my pupils and the rest of the congregation, such an example of delay. What I said to myself above all was that Mars had got something out of me. The gauge for him would be just at this awkward collapse. He got out of me that there were something I were very much afraid of. He should probably be able to make use of. My fear to gain, for his own purpose, more freedom. My fear was having to deal with the intolerable question of the grounds of his dismissal from school, as that were really but the question of the horrors gathered beyond. His uncle should arrive to treat with me of these things for a solution that, strictly speaking, he ought now to have desired to bring on. But I could do so little to face the ugliness and the pain of it, I simply procrastinated and lived from hand to mouth. The board and my deep discomposure were immensely in the right. We're in a position to say, either you clear up with my guardian the mystery of this interruption in my studies, or you cease to expect me to lead with you a life that's so unnatural for a boy. What was so unnatural for the particular boy I was concerned with was his sudden revelation of a consciousness and a plan. That what really overcome me, what prevented me from going in. I walked round the church, hesitating, hovering. I reflect that I had already with him myself beyond repair. Therefore I could patch up nothing, and it was too extreme an effort to squeeze beside him into the pew. It would be much more sure than ever that pass his arm into mine and make me sit there for an hour in close silent contact with his commentary on our talk. For the first minutes since his arrival I wanted to get away from him. As I paused beneath the iris window and listened to the sounds of worship, or taken with an impulse that might master me, I felt, completely, should I give it the least encouragement. I might easily put an end to my ordeal by getting away altogether. Here were my chance. There were no one to stop me. I could give the whole thing up, turn my back and bolt. It were only a question of hurrying again for a few preparations to the house, which the attendants at church and so many of the servants would practically have left unoccupied. No one, in short, could blame me if I should just drive desperately off. Or were it to get away if I should get away only till dinner? That would be a couple of hours, at the end of which I had the acute provision. My little pupils would play at innocence, wonder about my non-appearance, and then train. What did you do, you naughty bad thing? Why in the world did you worry us so and take our thoughts off too, don't you know? Did you desert us at the very door? I couldn't meet such questions, nor, as they asked them, their false little lovely eyes. They were also exactly what I should have to meet that, as the prospect was sharp to me, I at last let myself go. I got so far as the immediate moment were concerned, away. I come straight out of the churchyard and, thinking hard, retraced my steps to the park. It seemed to me that by the time I reached the house I had made up my mind to cynical flight. The Sunday stillness, both of the approaches and the interior, which I met no one, faintly stirred me with a sense of opportunity. If I had to get off quickly this way, I should get off without a scene, without a word. My quickness would have to be remarkable, however. The question of a conveyance was one great one to settle. Tormented in the hall with difficulties and obstacles, I remember sinking down at the foot of the staircase, suddenly collapsing there on the lower step, and then, with a revulsion, recalling that it were exactly where, more than a month before, in the darkness of night, and just so bowed with evil things, I had seen the spectre of the most horrible of women. At this I were able to straighten myself. I went the rest of the way up. I made it in my turmoil for the schoolroom, where there were objects belonging to me that I should have to take. But I opened the door to find again, in a flash, my eyes unsealed. In the presence of what I saw, I reeled straight back upon resistance. Seated at my own table, in the clear mean daylight, I saw a person who, without my previous experience, I should have taken at the first blush for some housemaid who might have stayed at home to look after the place, and who, availing herself of rare relief from observation, and at the schoolroom table, my pens and ink and paper, had applied herself to the considerable effort of a letter to her sweetheart. There was an effort in the way that, while arms rested on the table, her hands, with evident weariness, supported her head. But the moment I took this in, I had already become aware that, in spite of my entrance, her attitude was strangely persistent. Then it were, with the very act of its announcing itself, that her identity flared up in a change of posture. She rose, not as if she had heard me, with an indescribable grand melancholy of indifference and detachment, and, within a dozen feet of me, stood there as my vile predecessor, Dishonoured and tragic, she ruled before me, but even as I fixed, and for memory secured it, the awful image passed away. Dark as midnight in her dark dress, her haggard beauty and her unutterable woe, she had looked at me long enough to appear to say that her right was to sit at my table, or as good as mine to sit at hers. While these instants lasted, I had the extraordinary chill of feeling that it was I who were the intruder. It was a wild protest against it that I accidentally addressed her. "You terrible, miserable woman!" I heard myself break into a sound that, by the open door, rang through the long passage, and the empty house. She looked at me as if she heard me, but I had recovered myself and cleared the air. There was nothing in the room the next minute but the sunshine, and the sense that I must stay. That's the end of chapter 15. Again, I don't understand the motives here. She's just trying to get out. And she seems so concerned with the children, so the running off seems like such a strange sort of break of character again. But I do think she's frantic. I think she's sort of run over the place. Anyhow, one more chapter, I think, and then we'll call it for the evening. So, chapter 16. I had so perfectly expected the return of the others to be marked by a demonstration. I was freshly upset at having to find them merely dumb and discreet about my desertion. Instead of gaily denouncing and caressing me, they made no allusion to my having failed them, and I was left for the time on perceiving that she too said nothing to study Mrs. Gross's odd face. I did this to such purpose that I made sure they had in some way brothered a silence that, however, I would engage to break down in the first private opportunity. This opportunity come before tea. I secured 5 minutes with her in the housekeeper's room where, in the twilight and with a smell of lately baked bread, with the place all swept and garnished, I found her sitting in pained placidity before the fire. So I steer still, so I see her best, facing the flame from a straight chair in the dusky shining room, a large clean picture of the put away, with drawers closed and locked, the rest without a remedy. Oh yes, they asked me to say nothing, and to please them, so long as they were there. Of course I promised. What had happened to you? I only went with you for the walk, I said. I had then to come back to meet a friend. She showed her surprise. A friend, eh? Oh yes, I've a couple, I laughed. Did the children give you a reason? We're not alluding to your leaving us. Yes, they said you like it better. Do you like it better? My face had made her rueful. No, I like it worse. After an instant I added, they say why I should like it better. No, Master Miles only said, I must do nothing but what she likes. I wish indeed he would. What did Flora say? Oh, Miss Flora was too sweet. She said, oh, of course, and I said the same. I thought a moment. You were too sweet too. I can hear you all. But nonetheless, between Miles and me, it's now all out. All out? Danny stared. But what, miss? Everything. It doesn't matter, I made my mind. I came home, my dear, I went on, for a talk with Miss Jesson. I had by this time forced the habit of having Mrs. Gross literally well in hand in advance of my sounding that note. So even now, as she bravely blinked under the signal of my words, I could keep her comparatively firm. A talk? Do you mean she spoke? It came to that. I found her on my return in the schoolroom. And what did she say? I can hear the good woman still, and the candour of her stupefaction. And she suffers the torments. Well, this of a truth that made her, as she filled out my picture, gape. Do you mean, she faltered, of the lost? Of the lost, of the damned? That's why to share them. I faltered myself with the horror of it. My companion with a less imagination kept on. To share them? She wants Flora. Mrs. Gross might, as I have given to her, fairly have fallen away from me had I not been prepared. I still held her there, to show I was. As I've told you, however, it doesn't matter. Because you've made up your mind. But to what? To everything. And what do you call everything? By descending for their uncle. Oh, miss, and pity do, my friend broke out. Ah, but I will. I see it's the only way. What's out, as I told you with Miles, is that if he thinks I'm afraid to, and has ideas of what he gains by that, he should see he's mistaken. Yes, his uncle shall have it here from me on the spot, and before the boy himself, if necessary, that I'm not to be reproached without having done nothing about more school. Yes, miss, my companion pressed me. Well, there's that awful reason. There were now clearly so many of these from our poor colleague that she was excusable for being vague. But a what? Why, the letter from his old place. We'll show it to the master. They ought to have done so at the instant. Oh, no, said Mrs. Gross with decision. I'll put it before him, I went on execrably. But I can't undertake to work for the questions on behalf of the child who has been expelled. Be nary in the least known what, Miss Gross declared. For wickedness, for what else? When he's so clever and beautiful and perfect, is he stupid? Is he untidy? Is he infirm? Is he ill-natured? He's exquisite. So it can be only that. That would open up the whole thing. After all, I said, it's their uncle's fault. He left here with such people. He didn't really in the least know them. The fault's mine. She turned quite pale. Well, you shan't suffer, I answered. The children shan't, he emphatically returned. I was silent a while, and we looked at each other. And what am I to tell him? You needn't tell him anything, I will tell him. I measured this. Do you mean you're right? Remembering she couldn't, I recalled myself. How do you communicate? They tell the bailiff, he writes. And should you like him to write our story? My question had a sarcastic force that I had not fully intended. It made her, after a moment, inconsequently break down. Tears was in her eyes. Ah, Miss, you were right. Well, tonight, I at last returned. On this we separated. That's the end of chapter 16, and where we shall lead off for the night. I'll come back to this, I think probably tomorrow, finish it out, but yeah. For the time being, let's head back over to my chilling, my resting place and do a little commentary. I'm not entirely sure what to make of this one. It's frustrating, but it's not frustrating in the way that some texts are because they're not good. It's well written, I'm fairly certain. Oh, it's difficult. And it's, I don't know, engaging I mean, it's very strongly engaging, but it just, I don't know, it's difficult. I struggle with it to a degree that I just don't know, really. Anyhow. That being said, though, yeah. I'm trying to think of what else to say about it, but I think for the time being, I've just about said all I've wanted to say. It's not, for all that it is like a solid book with a lot going on to it, it's much denser than it is sort of filled with things. So to an extent, I don't really think I can say more about it than I've already said. I'll probably do a big sort of finishing thing when we complete it, which I intend to be tomorrow. But for the time being, I think I don't have too much else to say. So let's see if anyone's alive to read out. So, you're very welcome. Oh, and the little graded channel thing is not working. Oh, sure, well, let's go see who's live, shall we? The old fashioned. Oh, Plague's live. I didn't realise she was streaming that. Okay, well, I guess that tells us where we're going then. Right, I'll read out the Plague. Yeah. As always, though, I do thank you all so much for being here. I do very much hope that you have taken something from the story and enjoyed it. And again, a big thank you again to Les for buying a plaque. I'm really excited that someone's done it, and yeah, I'll have that ready for you tomorrow. Kindly, yeah. Thank you too, Abby, and thank you. I also hope you have a great weekend. Yeah. Read through. There we go. Grand. And that being the case, as always, I'm always so thankful for you being here. I say it every time, but I do mean it every time. I thank you so much for everything you've done. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and I wish that you have a lovely rest of your day, whatever time of day that should be for you. Until again, the next time we are here. When of course you have to come back to get my blessing. I'm standing by that a little bit. But yeah, that's the case. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and as always, ta-ra.